Look it up.
I gotta look it up. He has a T-shirt about fear.
Look at the totals. I know. I'm laughing at the last one. I think I gave him 0. I think I had to give him.
Yeah.
I think I had to give him 1 or something. I was like, no, I want to give him nothing. Here's some.
It's like they're so.
I thought it was working, but nothing's coming up. What is it? Are there printed agendas anywhere in this room?
I was wondering if that was what they were talking about.
Yes.
Oh.
Sarah,
Hey, Barb, you
remember
have
the
printed
security key that
agenda?
you're just given? What is it?
Ferndale asked for the capital F. Capital.
That's
Ferndale.
really.
But it's
That's
like-
very high tech.
No, it's old, but
Ferndale Guest. Just
Now
the
it's on record.
F capitalized. But yeah, no, it's old. But I had an iPad.
Yeah, kind of. My argument for that one was, we're going to make it that. Why don't we just not make it password protected?
Yeah.
You can't get
Or
to
just
the,
put
Thank
password
you.
as password?
yeah, you can't get to the network with that
That's
one.
what my
I
password
feel
is at
kind of
work.
lost. I can't get to meetings. I don't have
That's what all of our. That's what all of our passwords are.
One's coming. One that I never
Do we have an extra hard copy?
I know. I usually like the hard copies. I'll write all over it. Are usually some derivative of my name and the year I
One extra hard
graduated.
copy?
Oh, but I do have,
There's one.
to formally say that I will not break Ferndale law.
I don't.
Their agreement.
Saved it in Dropbox. I figured I can get Dropbox anywhere, but it's not working.
All that, yes.
God forbid you should agree to something
Oh, thank you. That was from like March.
Mark? What are you doing? That's all right. Come on, let's sit to me.
I have at least
No, it won't go. It's not a PowerPoint. It won't go in a PowerPoint. So we'll just have to put the 2 images up.
See if it remembers to make it back in. You said capital F Ferndale Guest. Yeah. It might remember the password. Grab my. Oh, but it's trying to go to Ferndale Public. I want to go to Ferndale Guest, right?
He's not here.
There it goes.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay. I call to order this Thursday, September 11th, 2014 Ferndale Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Krista Azar.
Here.
Sarah Roediger.
Here.
Kate Baker.
Here.
Kevin Petrino.
Here.
Deborah Brazen.
Here.
Melanie Piana.
Here. Do we need a motion to excuse the absent members?
You normally do that, don't you?
Yeah. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next up, approval of the agenda. Any edits, modifications to the agenda as submitted? There's motion to approve?
Motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support. Okay, we have a motion and a support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, next up is approval of the minutes from the last meeting, July 10th, 2014. Any edits or modifications to that? Otherwise, I'll look for a motion to approve as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and support. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next up, we're up to new business. We do have 2 public hearings this evening. The first of which is for limited rezoning of the property commonly known as 241 Pearson, as submitted by Woodward Senior Housing, LLC. We'll have a brief introduction by staff, and then we'll open up the public hearing to the public. And I guess we'll have to start with staff.
Sure. As the Planning Commission is aware, this is an item that appeared before the Planning Commission previously as a discussion item. Informally, the applicants were here to discuss their potential partnership with the Archdiocese and St. James Parish. What is being proposed is the subject site has historically been used as part of the Archdiocese as a St. James Parish and normally associated accessory uses. One time the additional building and facilities were used as a school and other functions throughout the evolution of the church as it's been part of the Ferndale community. In recent years, the associated school building has been unoccupied for at least a couple of years, and I'll let the applicants fill you in on the detail of it. They approached staff with the potential to partner with the Archdiocese and use the school building as a senior assisted living facility. Potentially some senior housing, some assisted living, and then the associated uses that go along with that in conjunction with the Archdiocese and the parish. We had that discussion here. The intent of the uses seemed to fit in combination with the church and with the intent of the master land use plan. In fact, it meets several goals that were discussed here regarding aging in place, having facilities for seniors close to our downtown, where it's walkable and easily accessible. It seems to blend in well as a transition from Woodward to the neighborhood, and it fits well with the Archdiocese and the use of the remainders, the property as the primary, parish use. In investigating the use, there's one issue that arose as part of the process, and that is technically the property is zoned C2, which is a general retail zoning. The general retail zoning, one, creates existing nonconformance for the parish itself, which is allowed to continue in perpetuity with normally accessory or customarily incidental uses. But it also does not permit the assisted living facilities. Those are permitted in our R3 and R4, our densest residential districts. So after what I would say is an enormous amount of internal discussion between myself, the city attorney, the applicants, several meetings, many other folks have been involved in this. We were looking for, based on the positive feedback from the Planning Commission, the simplest way to get from A to B, and may actually truthfully have over-evaluated it internally. At the end of the day, in discussions with the city attorney, what we're recommending is that the parcel itself, the entire parcel with all of its uses, be rezoned to R3, which is single-family, multiple-family zoning district. It's actually a less intense district than what it is right now. It eliminates the nonconformance from the parish and allows the applicant to go forward with the use of the buildings, existing buildings, for the permitted uses within the district, which do include senior assisted living or assisted living in general. So we've publicly noticed it in the paper. We did get one comment regarding the notice and took it to heart in that in our notice we very correctly described the property through its legal description, but failed to mention that it was commonly referred to as St. James Church. So we've corrected that going forward and apologize for that mistake. Other than that, we did not receive any calls in regards to the property. So the staff report goes through the details of it. The applicants are here, obviously, to walk you through their project. And then as part of the staff report, we are recommending approval of the rezoning going forward. One, to eliminate the nonconformance for the parish, and two, to allow the adaptive reuse of those existing buildings as a single assisted facility. So, and obviously we're here to answer any questions.
Okay. And just to be clear before you open up the public hearing, this is for a rezoning of the property to R3. It's not for the site plan. This isn't a conditional rezoning.
Correct.
For the site plan for what these gentlemen might propose. This is a straight rezoning.
Correct.
To R3.
The use is once rezoned, and we've explained this to the applicant as well, require a special land use. It's kind of an odd situation in that there is at this time no additional construction being proposed here, but they will at the end of the day have it gone through a rezoning and a special land use permit process, both of which require public hearings to allow the use, whereas the site plan will be reviewed as part of the special land use, but there's really no additional site plan approval necessary. There's no additional construction, just some additional landscaping and things. So it's an oddball situation in that, but yes, both of those requirements will need to be met.
Okay, so just to be clear for anyone in the audience who may be here on this topic, so the discussion tonight is just rezoning of the property to R3 without any particular use. If the use that has been submitted this evening for discussion, if the rezoning is approved and they want to proceed with that use, they have to come back for another public hearing to allow for special land use for assisted living facilities. So with that, I want to open up the public hearing for the rezoning from C2 to R3. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak? Please come to the podium, state your name and address, and we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. With that, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this topic?
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Judy Palmer, 285 West Hazelhurst. You keep referring it to the church, and I believe we're only talking about the school. And I want to be corrected on that, because last I heard the church was still going to be functioning.
Yeah, the church, but the entire parcel will be rezoned.
Okay. I thought that the only parcel that was going to be changed in what it's going to be used for was the school, and maybe from the drive to Hazelhurst.
Just to be clear, we're not discussing site plan issues tonight. We're just talking about
No, I'm
zoning
trying
of
to
property.
clarify what is being rezoned.
Which
If you're-
property?
Yeah, if you're rezoning the whole space, then the church would not be able to exist in an R3.
No, it does.
Yes, it can.
It actually, it's not allowed to exist in the existing C2 rezoning at R3, it is a special land use in R3.
R3 is
It's
residential. That's
know.
what R stands for.
I don't want to get into a discussion
Well, no,
here,
I
but
just want to
yes.
make sure that we have an understanding of what's being done, because as far as I knew, from everyone that I've talked to, the church will still be in existence.
Okay, so your questions and comments are concerning the existing condition of the church and the future of the church.
No, what part of that land between Pearson and Hazelhurst is actually going to be Woodward Senior Living? I'm trying to have an understanding of that.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
All right.
Are there any other public comments? Okay, seeing no other public comments, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the Planning Commission. We do want to hear from the applicant, and just to respond again to the person that just spoke, again, this is a rezoning, not a site plan, so anything that the gentleman that may want to discuss what they might be doing, tonight we're looking at the big picture of the entire property. And just to clarify, Derek, if I can, the property we're talking about is the entire frontage between Pearson and Hazelhurst, correct?
Correct.
And it goes all the way back to the existing R1 zoning?
Correct. It is all of the parish-owned property.
Right,
correct.
so it's the parking lot, it's the church, it's the school, it's the entire property, from a C2, which is a business district, which does not permit senior living and probably not places of worship
does
either,
not,
to a residential district, which does permit residential homes in addition to secondary uses which are complementary to residential uses, which include schools, churches, playgrounds, city service buildings, city hall, things of that nature. Those are all permitted in the residential districts.
Correct.
So with that clarification, if the applicant, if you'd like to, speak to the rezoning that we're looking at this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Derek, thank you for all. Actually, Derek, you spoke well to it, better than I could have already. I appreciate Derek's time and effort that he put into this thing over the last couple of months, putting it together. John, I'm with Allison Financial. I'm Bob Storm. I'm the president. This is Vice President John Marusich, who's the architect also. And I have with us tonight, Chuck Sauer, who is the Vice President of Allison, Chuck White, who is the Chief Financial Officer of the parish, and Father Paul Chateau, who is the pastor of both Our Lady of Fatima and St. James Parish. I think, first of all, I think we have to go back just for a second to answer what the other question was before. 2010, we found out the City Council changed the zoning from institutional, which allowed churches to C2 right up and down Woodward, and whitewashed everything and then grandfathered everything in. So the intention was always to keep it as a church's grandfather, so I can answer that. The object, I think John and I are not going to go into any real heavy specifics. We just want to get short here, is that the church and the assisted living will work together. One will be one corporation. The church will stay as Our Lady of Fatima, our Mother of Perpetual Help, which is the two parishes that have joined together now to form one parish. And Father Paul is an anomaly in the Catholic Church in that most priests only want to run one parish at a time. And he has the sensitivity of wanting to keep St. James open for Ferndale and keep Our Lady of Fatima open in Oak Park. So, and to answer the question, where does it go? There is cross parking between two. The agreement between the two will say, we will have parking that's needed for the senior housing, and the church will have their parking, and on certain occasions there's a cross easement that makes both parties work very, very well together. I just like to throw one thing out. This has been an icon since 1926. Father doesn't want to shut down an icon, and that's the most important part. We are going to put in a 100 and some bed unit in the nursing home. As Derek said, we are not doing any structure change. We're using the exact footprint of all the buildings that are there. And I think that's essential for the neighborhood. I think there's going to be less confusion in our neighborhood than a charter school. The parish looked at a charter school to come in, They already been, lack of a better term, burnt. That the building's been sitting empty for 4 years, and the building has now become obsolete. The heating system doesn't work. The boiler blew out. And if a charter school wanted if the Archdiocese even wanted to put a charter school in there, it would probably cost about $2 million to get it upgraded to even to that extent. As a new entity coming in, we absorb all those costs, and we'll bring it up to date and make it a viable building. John, do you want to add just a little bit?
John Morosich, architect. I'm also a resident of Ferndale, by the way. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I am. To answer specifically the lady's question, all the areas you see on the screen that are colored in blue, as well as that one in reddish, is part of the senior living housing facility, the former rectory, the former convent, and the area that's outlined as the church will remain as a church, will continue, as Bob indicated, as a church with shared parking. I think that answers that question.
Okay, thank you. I think, again, tonight I really want to focus our discussion on the rezoning from a C2 to an R3. The site plan that you're showing tonight is one potential option of what could happen if the site is rezoned. In addition to that, someone could come in and build single-family homes on the property. They could build a number of other things that are permitted in the residential zoning district. And the discussion and the decision before the Planning Commission tonight is whether or not it's appropriate to rezone this property from a C2 to an R3, considering all the potential uses that could happen in a C2 and all potential uses that could happen in the R3, taking into consideration the criteria in our zoning ordinance, which includes compatibility with the surrounding uses, impact to the community on traffic and services, and things of that nature, and consistency with the master plan. So with that, I do want to reserve kind of a detailed discussion on operations of the site for a special land use public hearing if it gets to that level, which I think a lot of us here hope that it does at some point. But again, tonight I really want to focus the discussion on the rezoning criteria.
Can I add one more thing, Madam Chair?
Sure.
If you look at the compatibility of both the church and the senior citizens, it is more compatible with a neighborhood than a C2. A C2 could put in a Burger King. It could put in anything in a C2. But the R3 allows it to be compatible with west and north and south families. And I think that is what you have to look at. And because if down the road, if somebody wants to put in something else, even if it was apartments, it's more compatible with the community than if it was a C2 with a Burger King or XYZ in there.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Back to the commission. Are there discussion, comments, questions anyone has of the applicant or staff? Or
Just a comment. Looking at the future land use plan, this corridor along Woodward is sort of mapped out, designated for commercial development. Although, reading through the master plan, we also talk about our community's aging population, our country's aging population, frankly, and the need for senior housing facilities that allow people to stay in our community and that are close to shopping and transit corridors, and this clearly fits that need as well. I think it's an appropriate site from that perspective to locate an amenity like this.
okay.
One concern I have is the incompatible use of the building next door. It has been a club bar, and the city has had, over a period of time, issues with noise and incidences outside that. So I understand that the liquor license is still available for that property, and so I'm worried for future use of that property if it's ever turned back into a productive use, that there might be incompatibility between a bar club, dance club, because that's what it was for, with the residential rezoning.
But couldn't anything in C2 to the north or south eventually be a bar or restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, the properties to the north and south are zoned to C2. Technically, this property as C2 itself could be sold and that be considered. There is a liquor license issue. If I understand, and I would pass this along to the city attorney to ask him as well, under our liquor license policies now, different than they were in the past, any liquor license transfer in the city is required to be 51% non-liquor sale revenue to approve the transfer of the license. Now, because this license is here with this building, I don't know if that applies. I believe it does, which should, in theory, keep it from being strictly a bar club type facility. If you have to do 51% of your revenue as non-liquor sales, that usually lends itself to more of a neighborhood restaurant or something of that nature. But I can double check that with the city attorney as well. But as far as the incompatibility is, I don't know at this point what that property will be redeveloped as.
I think that's kind of just a common, not common, but a problem that's going to arise as we increase density and have mixture of uses. And, this is a Woodward corridor. I guess that's my only real hesitancy about rezoning it to residential, is that we're on a Woodward corridor we're trying to densify and prepare for transit. But again, I think senior living would be a good use if that use ever, came through, because there is, concentration of people that would have access to transit and different uses. But that mixture of uses, I think, lends itself to some type of.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, but City Council has had experience with residential units being next to bars. So I want to make sure that we are limiting future problems where possible.
Okay. Great. Any other thoughts or discussion? Otherwise, we do have some draft motions, or a draft motion here this evening. Again, the process for rezoning is a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council. So any recommendation that comes out of this board tonight would be forwarded on to the City Council at their next available meeting, which I'm not sure when that is scheduled for. And then again, following, if the rezoning was approved, then if this specific project for assisted living facility were to proceed, they would come back to the Planning Commission for a public hearing for that use, as it is a special land use in the R3 zoning, in which case we would talk specifically about access, parking, portions of the site, and how they would be developed at that time.
Through the chair, I wanted to make one more point, that the C2 zoning, if I'm reading this correctly, allows upper level residential units. So residential is allowed on this parcel to some degree. Just wanted to make a note of that.
Okay. Through the chair, I have a question for staff, because I'm just not finding it quickly here in my ordinance. Thinking about future development on this site, if we were thinking about heights and density along Woodward, what's the maximum height to which we can build if we were to build something new in an R3?
45 feet.
So significantly lower than our commercial districts that are currently along Woodward.
I'd have to look
Or
at
no,
C2.
it's lower than CBD, but not necessarily C2.
C2, I think, is only 50 or 55. Let me double check.
Thank you.
I don't have my book with me.
So it's not a significant reduction in potential height, density, massing along Woodward from what C2 currently is,
Let me pull it up.
as opposed to CBD. I don't know, I can't put my finger on this. Got setbacks here.
Yeah, C2 fronting Woodward is 70-foot height.
Does it go all the way to the C2?
Yeah, it's 70 feet in C2 currently.
So we are sacrificing some,
Potential density.
exactly, but for a use that we've called for in our master plan, in a location that we've called for in our master plan. Okay, all right.
Yeah, all Woodward frontage is 70 feet in the C2. So yeah, you'd be losing 15 feet. 25 feet, I'm sorry, I can add.
Just, I guess, while we're still discussing this, remind me, I think you touched on it briefly in your introduction, but when we first talked about this initially as a discussion item, I think we talked about it being just accessory use that could be customarily incidental to a place of worship. And I think staff went back and you said Spokeland had many meetings.
Yep.
And so that was not the path, obviously, that.
It was a significantly debated point, whether the assisted living facility could be used. Any primary use of a parcel as a permitted use or as the primary use of the parcel is allowed to have uses that are customarily incidental or accessory as part of that use. An industrial facility has an office, but it may only be 5% of the building. And there's others examples of that. Places of worship have usually had a broad breadth of accessory uses: schools, daycares, food pantries, shelters, lots of other things that go along with a large parish or a place of worship use, regardless of the faith. And they cross a broad spectrum of additional uses that go on as an accessory use. We did look at senior assisted living potentially as an accessory use in which a rezoning would not be required. Even though the existing parish is not conforming, it's the primary use of the parcel and it's grandfathered in. So the use is allowed in perpetuity, and we're not talking about the addition of any additional structures. So we did discuss that, I mean, literally ad nauseum. What it came down to is we brought it forward as a rezoning based on the fact of the existing nonconformance of the parcel. But that was not a unanimous decision. There was lots of debate that took place back and forth. But for the long-term use of the property, to eliminate the existing nonconformance of the parish on the C2 piece, we thought this was maybe for financing and other things that may come into play later down the road. We thought this was maybe the safest way to go. We recognize that C2 is probably not the preferred land use along Woodward, or that R3 is, that C2 went through the full. And we also acknowledge that if the parish use and the senior assisted living facility, which we believe fits within the master plan of staff, goes away, that if someone were to come back and ask to rezone the property to C2 to gain the full breadth of the height, and that would also be supported by the zoning. Mm-hmm. And that lessened our concern with the rezoning, knowing that if an appropriate development came to this site subsequently, for whatever reason, hopefully we never have to deal with that, but if the parish and the senior assisted living were not to be successful, we think a rezoning back to C2 or another use that supports the type of density and TOD development we want to see would also be supported and approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council. It's unfortunate we're in this position to bounce back and forth. It's not what we'd like to do, but as we said, we think based on the uniqueness that it's reasonable in this case. So. Sorry, that was a very long answer for a very short question.
Was a conditional rezoning explored that tied it to this specific? We
talked about that, and conditional rezoning doesn't require a different notice. If the applicant were to offer a condition, the one condition we discussed that it appears may address the issue if the applicant would offer it would be some type of reverter, that if their use ceased to exist, that there would be an automatic reverter back to C2. Right. And I think Mr. Soren and the applicants understand what that would be, is the rezoning would then be, the recommendation would have a condition that if the use ever ceased and the parish ceased operation or the senior assisted living ceased operation, that the property would automatically revert to C2 without the rezoning process. And I think that's a reasonable condition as well if the Planning Commission wanted to go that way. And the applicant were willing to offer it. So it was discussed, but it was just for that one condition.
Okay. Does the applicant have any comments on that?
I'm not 100% sure how that would affect the financing, though, because stipulations on properties usually affect the end financing, meaning that if you're going to get a loan, and you're going to get a loan on that building, and it may go on, and it may not be, it may go from senior citizen to independent, or whatever it may be, which still stays within the confines of a residential situation. To put a stipulation that has to be specifically this type of exactly building in this, I think would curtail the property and curtail the project. I think if down the road the property sold, you're doing the whole property, meaning you're going to sell a church too. What's the church going to turn into? I mean, you're really trying to. I think it'd be tough if you put a stipulation on it. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, from a staff point of view, we ultimately decided not to advertise it or go forward as a conditional, just because of the support or to reevaluate the property if this use goes away, either through a city-initiated action or most likely any applicant that would purchase it that didn't want to continue any type of assisted living facility is going to willingly come here and ask for the benefit of the C2 district. Obviously, it probably, this rezoning probably takes away from the highest and best value of the property. So anybody looking to acquire it, I think, is going to be right back here. Now, I can't guarantee that, obviously, but ultimately, because of some of the issues that come with reverter clauses and tracking those and dealing with those, and because of where the property is located, that was why staff didn't bring it forward as a conditional.
Okay. All right, thank you for that clarification. Any other questions, discussion, or again, we'll wait for a motion?
I have a question, possibly, probably to you, Derek. In the motion, we're looking at rezoning 238 and 241 Pearson Road. Does that include both parking lots?
Yes.
In our current zoning, that's P1. Does that change?
Correct.
So P1
Yep.
for the zoning will become R3?
Yep. Correct.
Or 2? Okay.
Just might clarify that in the motion, that it's from C2 and P1 to
So
R.
it's both. So we're changing P1 to,
It's not just C2.
okay.
Yes. So that there's similar setbacks and everything that go along with it. Yes, that should be C2 and P1.
P1, okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the clarification. That's it.
Okay. That clarification, I would like to make a motion. Or any other additional questions or discussion?
I move that the Planning Commission recommends to City Council to approve the rezoning application to rezone 238 and 241 Pearson Road from C2 General Commercial to and P1 parking, vehicle parking to R3 Single Multiple Family Residential, Sidwell numbers 25341766059 and 25341766056, with the following findings after a public hearing was held as set and published for this date and place. Shall I read all the findings?
You can just, as
Findings are stated.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Commissioner Piana. Do we have support?
Second.
Okay, we have support. Any discussion on the motion? Otherwise, roll call, please.
Okay, Krista Azar,
Yes.
Kate Baker,
Yes.
Kevin Petrino,
Yes.
Deborah Brazen,
Yes.
Melanie Piana,
Yes.
and Sarah Bodeger.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. So we do have a recommendation for rezoning to the City Council. Do you know, Derek, when that will be going on to the City Council?
I would assume the first meeting in October.
Okay. So, and then assuming everything goes well there, again, we expect another public hearing with you guys to talk about the details of the specific plan. All right, thank you. All right, next up, we have a public hearing for the rezoning of property commonly
Thank you,
known as...
ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a good night. At 853 East Mile Road, as submitted by Baseline Properties. Derek, if you could do a brief introduction again?
Actually, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Foster.
That's right.
Planner in our department did the site plan review and wrote the staff report for this, so we're going to allow her to present this to the Planning Commission as well.
And I'll correct him in saying rezoning review. So yes, so we had an application for a rezoning of 853 East 8 Mile. It's at the corner of Fair and 8 Mile there, and it is currently zoned OS, and the applicant is requesting to rezone it to C2. We reviewed the application based on the rezoning criteria of the state ordinance, and it seemed to be a complete application. They provided a site analysis of the existing conditions. It currently has 4 buildings, 3 existing non-conforming residential homes, and one building that's commercial. They provided a proposed site plan demonstrating that they could develop the property with the use of, within the C2 district. That was provided in your packet and is also shown in the staff review that they did put the building back on the back setback rather than the front setback. But it seems that all the landscaping and parking and all the components would fit should they reorient the building on the front lot line as would be required, and the applicant knows and would be willing to do the same. So the site, as I said, is zoned currently OS. The future land use plan, master plan, identify the property as commercial office. It's meant to encompass a wide range of general retail, service, and office uses to serve the day-to-day needs of residents.
The plan identifies 8 Mile as a principal artery that provides access to significant traffic generators, such as regional shopping centers. The applicant suggests that the conditions in the area have changed with recent development of the State Fairgrounds and the Meyer Shopping Complex, and state that the changing of the zoning to C2 would be consistent with this trend and be consistent with the goals of the master land use plan and future land use plan. Since that OS and C2 are very similar in uses and in the schedule of regulations, the applicant believes that the physical and environmental features are quite similar, as well as the impact with the adjacent uses, so to be quite negligible in differentiation between the two. One thing I will have actually the applicant review is they provided analysis on the application to show that they couldn't receive a reasonable return on their investment, but I'm going to let him, either Randy or Lowell, describe that. A little bit further, they provided an analysis that wasn't very thorough, but since Randy has come to me and provided a further analysis, so I'll let him go over that. So with that, okay, I think so.
All right, thank you. All right, again, this is a public hearing for a rezoning for the properties on the northeast corner of 8 Mile and Fair Avenue from OS to C2? To C2. Anyone from the public wishes to speak to address this topic? Come to the mic, state your name and address, 3 minutes. Seeing no movement, I'll go ahead and close that public hearing and invite the applicant up to the podium.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello. If you can just maybe speak a little bit to the staff report and to the criteria for the zoning. Again, we're not looking to get a site plan per se this evening, but more the criteria of the rezoning as to why you think a C2 is a more appropriate zoning than the OS.
And as Michelle mentioned, there were a few other things that we had added after her review that I just brought together. I just brought you something to pass out if that works for you.
Sure.
And I just went kind of line by line from, the objections or the concerns that were from the staff in regards to the rezoning there. Brought some things that we may have omitted originally. So,
okay.
And thank you guys so much for your time today. Currently, there's, as Michelle mentioned, there's 3 non-conforming residential units on there, a duplex and 2 single-family houses, as well as a single-story commercial retail establishment. These have been there since the 20s, I believe, and we've had them in our family for probably about 30 years now. With the rezoning that took place, the last rezoning to OS, it took it to everything was still grandfathered in, but it's still non-conforming to the current OS standard that's there right now. With the recent developments around there, across the street on 8 Mile, we decided that we wanted to take a review and try to not only improve the city, improve our own property with that, increase the tax base, and hopefully bring some more jobs to the area by building some new retail developments there. Looking through the 8 Mile corridor historically, since the rezoning, it doesn't appear that any OS or anything along the 8 Mile corridor has been developed since the rezoning took place. And I think OS in general throughout the city hasn't had any actual redevelopment as well, so the actual need for that was kind of questioned by us. Obviously, there was an extensive review originally when the rezoning took place, so we take that into light as well, but currently we just don't see the need for that, and we just don't see the actual return that would happen based on some of the other advertised rental rates that are on the area for office. I had on one of the, I think it was page page 2 of that. In the bold, it's a little bit more difficult to read, so I apologize for that. Just reviewing what's currently available on, there's a popular website similar to Zillow for residential. It's called LoopNet, where a lot of people advertise their commercial property for sale or for lease. And reviewing just what's in Ferndale currently for office to be leased as well as retail. It was shown that there's a significantly large difference between the two. One of them's a little bit over $8 a square foot for rentals for office space, whereas retail is a little bit under $13 per square foot for retail. That's also including the taxes, insurance, and whatnot. And with doing some calculations based on the standards that are set forth on, there's a RS means, which is a statistics on building cost and construction data based on standard loan rates, pretty conservative loan rates of 5%. We'd still need a higher per square footage rental rate yearly than what's currently available in OS or with office rentals. So we feel that if we were to go forward and even build an OS, something conforming to the OS standard, that we wouldn't be able to have even a break-even cash flow standpoint. It just wouldn't make sense for us to do any development, continue on with the current non-conforming 3 residential units and the 1 commercial retail unit that's there. Also, historically, we have had some retail establishments. Bloom's, the florist, who's now here on 9 Mile, and prior to that, there was other retail as well. So, historically, before the rezoning, there was retail in that area. I'm not sure outside of that there's any questions that you might have.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. All right, going back to the Planning Commission. If you have any questions of staff or the applicant or discussion, just to clarify, again, in the master plan for this property, the future land use plan calls for a commercial office?
Correct.
Is that correct on this property?
Correct.
So really either zoning would be supported by the master plan, the existing or the proposed, correct?
I would agree.
Okay. All right, I guess we'll open up for thoughts and discussion. You know, obviously the development on the south side of 8 Mile had a significant impact, I think, on that portion of 8 Mile. And it's breathed some new life into that area. And so I think, you know, potentially maybe assembling some of these pieces and come up with a more cohesive development may be a good idea at the right time. Just to be clear, looking at the aerials, so this includes 3 parcels, if that's correct? And then there still is an existing house. Is it 1 or 2 houses?
There's 3 houses.
No, that would be after this, before.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It looks like, I thought there was.
What it basically is, there are 3 sidewall numbers of 2 lots in each sidwall. So there's 3 sidwalls.
Right, there's 3 sidwalls.
2 lots on each sidwall. There's a house on each one of the sidwalls, and there's a commercial building on.
Well, if you're going to talk, please come up and use the microphone so we have it on the record.
Just to clarify, though, once if this parcels were assembled, let's say, there would essentially be 1 lone house then between this development and then the development to the east.
That's correct.
That's correct.
We have been in talks too with that owner to see if we can also assemble that lot into it. At this point, in this juncture, we haven't came to a full negotiation, but obviously if we could extend that and assemble it into this, it would prove more fruitful to have a larger establishment.
So is that door still open? Is it for negotiations, or is it a no way, no how?
No, he was, I was one that contacted the gentleman, and he was very favorable about selling that property. He had
found the number.
Well, he had other things that were taking his time, and therefore he just didn't want to negotiate at this particular time.
And he had a long-term tenant there that he's grown, I don't want to say fond of, but I mean, it's been a long-term tenant for him and doesn't want to place them out of house and home. So we've also discussed some of our other rental properties, possibly moving them into there as well.
Trading a piece of property as opposed to simply just buying it and using it, tearing it down.
So I guess, was there, I wonder if there was any sense in trying to incorporate that piece into this rezoning as well, so that if that, because now we're kind of leaving this island piece that is zoned similar to what's east of it, but it's kind of an island of use by itself.
The subject site at hand is actually like a quarter of the OS district, if that kind of puts it in perspective of the whole district.
Right.
And, yeah.
But then
so there's
in terms
the
of
two
actual
properties,
parcels.
there's 2 parcels to the east of it before the M1.
Right, but just based on use and size, the one OS piece is really large, and it's leaving one tiny residentially used parcel by itself.
But it's, I mean, it's residentially used, but not residentially zoned.
Right, it would still be next to it, but it's likely reuse would probably be to the,
Rather than a parking lot.
yeah, unless they understand the parking.
And, I mean, if it were to be continued as OS, you know, I think someone could potentially, I guess, build a development just like this, you know, with that piece of property there on the island. Obviously, we don't want to do that. If we can incorporate it and assemble it, that'd be preferable.
Okay. The information you passed out this evening, has the staff seen this before this evening, or is this just, have you seen this information?
He submitted it yesterday. Yeah, I didn't have a digital copy, so I didn't send it out to him.
No, it's fine. I'm just wondering, because in our staff report, staff recommends that there's not adequate information to support the rezoning. I just didn't know if you guys had a chance to review the additional information to see if that changed staff's opinion.
Basically, it's in reference to the demand of the uses that would be in a C2 versus an OS. We feel that the OS was made in determination during a comprehensive zoning review, and that without like market analysis, we feel that making a statement of, you know, we should be changes to C2 versus OS, that kind of limits the availability of OS properties within the city. So I guess that's why we made that recommendation.
Yeah, we did have a short time to take a look at it, and although it's obviously much more thorough and makes the case from a financial state and a vacancy state better than the original information, as far as changing the recommendation, we're staying consistent with the recommendation that, although it clarifies the situation quite thoroughly, that it doesn't discern itself enough from OS compared to C2 to not draw some of the same conclusions about OS. So if that helps at all.
I don't know if I agree.
Well, I
understand. Yeah, you certainly don't. Yeah.
I usually do.
Yeah.
I think what we're struggling, I think both staff and maybe planning commission are struggling with is that we're looking at 2 districts that are fairly similar in terms of uses permitted.
We agree.
The master plan really doesn't provide much direction in terms of differentiating between the 2 zoning districts, because office and commercial are both permitted. Correct. And just trying to step back and look big picture, you know, what's good for the city in terms of, you know, redevelopment and enhancing the 8 Mile corridor, and, you know, what could potentially go there in the future. I think when we did the zoning districts, most recently and did the update, you know, we were concerned about creating, you know, C2 corridors along the entire width, entire length of all of 8 Mile and 9 Mile, and wanted to reserve some areas that could be used exclusively for office. But obviously, that was something that we thought about at a certain time in market study. You know, market has its own ideas about what uses are appropriate at certain locations at different points in time. So I guess I'm less, I think it's a gray line. It's a hazy line between the OS and C2. And I'm just trying to think what's the best interest of that area.
And I want to make clear in both in Michelle and I's discussions, this was not a no-brainer for us. You stated kind of staff's opinion exactly how we discussed it in the office. Ultimately, we decided the recommendation is to not to rezone or to deny it, and that was based only on the fact that we were relying on that comprehensive master land use process and rezoning process and the work that went into that as opposed to looking at the parcels in isolation. But obviously, there's been several years that gone by and new information that have come in as well. So from a staff standpoint, we just wanted to reiterate that unlike several rezoning requests we see, this was not one where we instantly believed that the master land use plan 100% was opposed to it. Ultimately, we'd like to make a recommendation, but it was after much discussion internally as well.
Right. And I think also the discussions that we've had informally about just, less focus on use and more on design and going towards hybrid zoning and things of that nature, I think also kind of play into my thought process. Commissioner Baker, since you have it open, I'm just kind of thinking, in terms of rezoning to C2, what additional uses that would be potentially...
That's exactly what I'm looking at.
If you would like...
Office buildings are permitted in C2, which is nice. It's not special, it's not anything. It's permitted by right.
So are there drive-throughs? I think as
that's
stated
actually,
earlier.
I was just in that section, and if you note first, Michelle shouted out no. Drive-through and drive-in facilities are not permitted. Yes, special land use. Yes, special land use. I'm sorry. Special land use. Let me flip to the bigger.
I was going to say, it's easier if you go to
the bigger list.
Yeah, it's easier to go to the bigger one.
Look at mine.
I'm sorry.
You're over with your hard copy. My computer's
I know,
right here.
here we go.
I can pull up my electronic.
Well, the thing that I was noticing that is permitted by right, and I wanted to ask you about it in this sort of, a bit of a pro forma that you worked up, is that upper-level residential units are permitted by right in C2, and you've got some demand for residential rental on Bennett behind already, both houses and the apartment building that's around the corner on Fair. So I wondered if you guys had considered that upper-level residential and how it might help sort of support the lower-level office or commercial use.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we did originally consider that, actually hearing that with the prior.
As opposed to a two-story commercial.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'd be opposed to taking that under consideration to, add some density to it and also to, bring some people to the commercial underneath it.
Businesses, exactly.
It is a great selling point behind that as well.
Yeah.
And I think we'd consider taking a look further into that.
Well,
but I don't think at this point it's necessarily,
it's just an accessory thing or just an option that's available. And at this point, until we develop the plan fully and look at this parking requirements and look at the dollar numbers and things like that, then we can make a decision. It's nice. It's a nice thing to have in there, but I did observe a similar type of an operation on Hilton, just north of 8 Mile Road there.
And even over toward St. Louis, on the other side of Woodward, there are some upper level flats. So what's permitted by right in C2? We've got our upper level residential, medical, dental.
That's in office as well. Upper story.
Oh,
You can
right.
do that right now. I think really the objectionable uses that we were concerned about, particularly on 8 Mile, were adult regulated uses, which are not permitted. Correct. Drive-throughs, which would be a special land use. One of the questions I did have, the existing retail, is that a pawn shop?
No, that's the building that is on the northwest corner there.
Okay, because pawn shops are not permitted actually in either district, so.
Yeah.
That's why they bought the building from it.
Vehicle repair would be something that would be new, that would not be permitted currently. Dealerships, gas stations. Really that about sums up kind of the sometimes objectionable uses.
Right, and I mean, and also retail.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Permitted.
One of the uses that is permitted as a special land use in OS versus the C2 is medical marijuana, which we actually have had a lot of
that was something I made
requests for.
Something I made a note about was that actually we would be
eliminating
a spot where that would be permitted. So we're reducing the number of areas
right.
that's permitted, right?
Yeah, I believe 50% of the uses are similar within the two districts, and then the majority of the differences are special land uses.
Okay. Are there any other questions or further discussion, ideas, things to discuss? I would imagine, again, because they're so similar in terms of traffic and utilities and all of those types of things, I think the major difference really is quantifying the different types of uses that could be permitted. But it's a fairly small parcel that I'm sure can't accommodate a lot of the larger scale theaters and things of that nature.
Biggest difference that I saw was just commercial. And that's I think they've made a supply and demand case there.
Yeah.
I was going to say that we discussed the one component as to staff's recommendation. The only two issues we were concerned with were consistency with the process, when the master land use plan and the zoning ordinance were adopted, and the isolation of an individual OS piece. Or I guess it could still be redeveloped with the parcels to the west as well. So whether it's assembled as part of the properties to the east, it still has the ability to be redeveloped as an OS. We were a little concerned with it kind of sitting out there by itself, but the ideal situation would be if they were able to incorporate it. But if not, it most likely would be incorporated with any development that took place to the east as well. So it still has that opportunity.
Staff didn't happen to prepare a motion for approval, did they?
Well, it would basically be the exact same motion with the findings. You flop out recommends denial to recommends approval, and where it says does not, you change it to does. The findings would be the exact same.
There is a mistake in the recommended motion.
Oh, that's right.
It says approval versus recommends to City Council for approval or denial.
Supported by to recommend. Correct. Approval or denial. So anyone, a potential motion maker, if they are so inclined to make a motion to approve, the findings would simply be in the affirmative if it's negative, and in the negative if it's affirmative.
Correct.
The simplest way to say that, I think.
Next time we'll provide two.
And I'm sorry, through the chair to staff, Michelle, what was the city council thing that needed
To recommend.
to recommend? I'm sorry. Thank you very much. So we're recommending to council for approval.
Correct.
Of course. Thank you.
Again, recognizing that this isn't in any way a commitment to the site plan that has been shown. It's just the uses in general for the zoning.
I would move to recommend to the city council for approval the rezoning application to rezone 853 East 8 Mile Road from OS Office Service to C2 General Commercial, suitable numbers 2535377050, 2535377051, and 2535377054, with the following findings after a public hearing was held and set and published for the state in place. Second. Do you want me to read the findings?
Oh, I'm sorry.
As long as you change it to the affirmative.
Right, yes. So I'll go slow. Hold your second, Crystal. The future land use map identifies the subject site as commercial/office. The proposed zoning is consistent with the goals, policies, and future land use of the city's master plan. The proposed zoning is also consistent with the current development trends in the area. Period. Number 2. The site features and potential uses allowed in the proposed zoning district appear to be compatible with the surrounding uses and zoning as they are similar to those of the current zoning. How many times can we say zoning? 3. City infrastructure appears to be sufficient to support the potential uses permitted in the requesting zoning district. Period. I think we can omit 4, unless you want me to say so that it supports it. Or you could just the pro forma analysis as provided by the applicant in the supplemental documentation provided at the table appears to support the demand for properties zoned commercial rather than office. Is that close enough?
Okay. Do we have a support for the motion? Okay. Is that good? Do you still second me?
No. I have a question on the 4th point. So
Okay, I tried.
Yeah. Support. And then we can discuss it.
Supported by Czar. All right.
Okay.
Open for
I didn't want to
discussion.
call it a market analysis because it wasn't necessarily. It was really sort of a pro forma based on a particular project. But he did some research into other properties around the city and the reason that obviously this was consistent with future land use plan.
Did you have a thought?
How should I modify?
That's what I'm wondering is how much are we buying what's on this that was distributed? So because I'm not familiar with all the terms and the meanings and the depth of it. So I don't know if it should be referenced as a finding. I guess I would like to hear comments
Strike
on that.
number 4, maybe?
Okay.
I'm
So
comfortable
friendly-
striking number 4 altogether, and not considering specific pro formas related to a specific project as part of a rezoning.
I'd be comfortable.
So do we have a friendly amendment to withdraw the fourth condition of finding? And the supporter?
Yes.
The seconder support?
Second, yes.
So, very friendly amendment to get rid of number 4. Not all the
Commissioner Azar.
official.
Really understand it very well, and I'd rather just,
So everyone understands, so we just have the first 3 findings for the rezoning.
And I'd rather tie it to the future land use plan than a specific project, so.
Okay. All right, is there discussion on the motion on the table? All right, roll call, please.
Okay. Krista Zauer?
yes.
Kate Baker?
Yes.
Kevin Petrino?
Yes.
Deborah Brazen?
Yes.
Melanie Piana?
Yes.
Sarah Rodiger?
Yes. All right, thank you. So again, this goes to City Council next, I believe probably in October, early October. And then similarly, you have to come back to us for a site plan, and if there's a special land use, we'll also have another public hearing. And in the meantime, try to work on your neighbor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, next up, we have a site plan without a public hearing. Shops at Camborne, site plan approval for 23050 Woodward. Michelle?
Yes, thank you. So, this is site plan approval for 23,050 Woodward Avenue. John Avro and the applicants have come to Planning Commission previously as a discussion item to talk about this site. They have sent, well, I guess I should just kind of describe the site again. Just to remind everyone that it is the old Pizza Hut site. They are proposing to knock down that building and put up a 72,000 square foot commercial complex. 7,200. You see that change? No.
You guys know you were building 72,000?
We decided to add the density in for it.
Yeah.
Woo!
Speak about parking requirements. So they have subsequently went to appearance review committee, changed their elevations, and then went to site plan review committee and design committee, has sought the approval of those committees, and have come back with updated site plans. We've reviewed those, and the findings are in your staff report. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Taylor
Okay,
Talk.
so,
I'm sorry.
yes, elevations have been updated, site plans were submitted, they've got approvals from this appearance review committee and design committee from the DDA.
Okay. All right.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I was just going to add the one thing, that the site plan they've made some adjustments to the site plan since the last time they were here. Obviously, as part of the discussion item, the elevations were a primary point of contention. Although the building is still single-story, and we know the ongoing discussion with that in the community. As Michelle pointed out, we did ask them that prior to coming back here to this commission, that they meet with the DDA Design Committee and Appearance Review Committee, and have made significant changes to the elevation that, again, it's not the type of height the Planning Commission and either the DDA want, but the Design Committee had a significant impact, and they went there willingly. It was not something they were required to do. Because they weren't seeking any facade money, they weren't seeking any grant money. But they did it in an attempt to try to understand what the DDA wanted and what the Planning Commission wanted from the uniqueness of the elevations. And did garner some decent support, or solid support from the Design Committee, and a unanimous approval from the Appearance Review for the elevations and the changes they made. There are a couple of conditions on the site plan, probably the most significant being we would like them to reduce the width of some of their parking spaces and add some landscape island in between. But other than that, the site does appear to be technically compliant with the city's codes and ordinances for parking, lighting, and the normal site plan considerations from a technical compliance standpoint. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, do you want to give us an update since we saw you last? Was it in May?
Yes, it was actually in June.
Was it June?
Hello, everyone. I'm John Abro. Again, we met back in June. I would hate to repeat everything they have talked about, but yes, we were here on June for the site plan review discussion for the proposed development of the same size square foot building, 7,200 square feet, but it was a different design. Everyone did not like the design. It was reminded as a suburban, Big Beaver corridor, and something that was across the street. So we did take some time. There was a few months trying to redesign the building. Met with the owners. My staff, we actually went down to Ferndale quite a bit and walked on the streets of 9 Mile and as well as Woodward to try to not just copy and paste, but the idea is to take the existing materials that was, buildings were designed for many years, and not only use but also enhance. So kind of incorporating that design into our retail development. And I took that to the owners, who happen to be here today. So I presented this design to them and said, this may not just give what the community wants, but also it kind of fits the design in what the DDA or community would want to see. So they've agreed, and we took the consideration from the Planning Commission back in June. Redesigned the building. It wasn't the height or the amount of glass. It was just everything combined. And again, the materials, the color scheme that really fit the unique downtown neighborhood. Not something you would see anywhere else, on Long Lake or another suburban neighborhood. So as Derek mentioned, we did make some few site plan changes to accommodate the design of the site plan itself. And again, I'm sure everyone has seen the facade design rendering that our office put together. I'm not sure if you want to get into the details, the materials, but as Derek mentioned, there was the approval from both committees. And if I can remember, I do want to say I think everybody did vote for the approval on the design, if I can remember, or everyone was happy with that at least. So if you have any questions, obviously there are some items that the city planner has recommended. I guess, do you want to discuss that after, or?
Well, no, that's fine. I mean, are you okay with the recommend? Are you agreeable to those things, or?
No, not to a few. The one issue was, again, I'm looking back at his conditions. So I guess the conditions are the items that are seeking for. So there's 10. I think there's only a few. Which is not many compared to the 10. So the first one was the parking spaces sizes and adding the island in the middle of the landscaping. Because it's such a smaller, rather than this being a large Target type parking lot, adding all that landscaping and curbing, I feel like it's unnecessary for the site because it is a smaller site. There's only 20 some parking spaces where somebody can actually, by adding the parking lot spaces, you would have people walking over the curb, because again, there's only 15 or so in the front area. Mm-hmm. So you'd have a lot of problems where the maintenance itself, and I just think that we have added the island curbs, but just not along the entire length of the parking spaces in the center. So that was one item.
And that's item number 7?
7, yes. I guess I'll have to ask Derek, I think that this is an item that was discussed before. Item number 9 was to break up the horizontal brick center, which I don't see a problem with that. I guess there'll be more of discussion after approval or disapproval, whatever it may be, with conditions. So I can understand where his comment, I believe if I'm correct, he's talking about again, like you said, north elevation. There's roughly, the entire wall, other than the fact that it kind of turns back into Woodward, it's 67 feet, and the glass is, the glass area is roughly around 24 feet, the design itself, so there's really 40 feet left. We were looking to use that as the areas for meters, even access door for the riser diagram, things like that. But again, I guess that can be discussed with Derek as we talked before. And the item number 10 was the the loading zone. And the reason why I place this loading zone there is if anyone have walked or driven by that site, the south side of the property, there's an existing building there, there's a fitness place. So the loading zone is not really interrupting their space. Actually, I have a photo here. It's actually a solid continuous wall with the I believe they have their dumpster, which is on our property, and there's a door there. It's not really used. It's more of a exit door, probably from the back room. I know that's a requirement for a loading zone being 10 foot from the rear or side lot line. But if we can get that approved today, where it can be located, what I propose. So, and that's pretty much it for the 3 items.
Okay. And I guess from that, Derek, could you, the 3 items that were noted, are these, does the Planning Commission have the ability to waive these requirements? Are these zoning ordinance requirements that are part of the zoning ordinance in terms of like the side lot line setback for loading zone?
The loading zone is a dimensional requirement that would require a variance to change. We don't have, technically, truthfully, based on the circumstance, we don't have an issue with where the loading zone is, but the ordinance says what it says. And hard dimensional requirements, I don't have the flexibility. If they were to seek a variance to reduce that 10 feet, most likely we would probably support it in the circumstances.
But the Planning Commission doesn't have the authority.
You do not have the authority as the Planning Commission. The other 2 are discretionary items. The insertion of the landscape island and reduction of the parking spaces to 16 feet is not a requirement. It's an option or an opportunity within the ordinance. We've always discussed at the Planning Commission the opportunity to reduce impervious surface, create green space, even for the minimal amount of stormwater recharge that comes with it. In this case, it would be extraordinarily minimal amount of recharge. But because there is the ability to do it, the parking spaces, if you reduce them all to 16 feet across the site, allow you to pick up that 8 feet. We felt it was an appropriate place to put it was to separate those parking stalls instead of using parking blocks, which in and of themselves can be a long-term maintenance headache. When you have the 18-foot spaces, you're required to use some type of bumper block at 2 feet. So we felt, as opposed to doing that it was a better idea to curve that off and put the landscaping in. And then I've forgotten what the other one, the elevations, that's also a condition of the Appearance Review Committee. That was not just a staff recommendation. They were comfortable with the elevations, but for the fact that they felt that long kind of horizontal block wall with nothing breaking it up. We're not looking for any type of significant architectural changes. Otherwise, we would have asked to see it before we brought it back. But even something as simple as, trellis and landscaping or ivy on the wall or something to break up that facade, a soldier course, something along there to do it. We're glad to work with them to come up with something. We understand for the interior use of the building, windows are probably not possible based on the discussions, but once they finalize where the utilities are going in and how that's going to look, those will need to be screened, and then we'd like to see something break up that facade a little bit as well. But those 2 are not requirements.
Okay. All right. So in response to the landscape island question, just so I understand, so in order to do what staff is suggesting, we have to get rid of the screening wall along the rear lot line?
No.
Just the trees?
Just the landscape.
Arborvitae? Or the whatever elimination of the spruce screening wall along the rear lot line?
Correct, yes.
Not the mason.
Not the existing masonry.
And the existing masonry wall, is on their property, not across the alley?
Correct. It separates their property from the alley, not the alley from the, it separates the property from the alley, not the alley from the residential.
Okay. But the evergreen trees along there the arborvitaes would have to go?
Yes, because you'd have to create, one, you have to create that 2-foot overhang. 2, we're a little concerned about the survivability there in that narrow of a strip anyways. We thought it would be more useful to put them in some type of other planting bed.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, I guess we can open up to Planning Commission. As you know, we had a meeting in June here, and I think the staff, or the Planning Commission gave our comments. I think I speak for myself. I think I'm a little disappointed to see that there wasn't some more substantial changes to the plan as suggested. We were hoping for, as you know, more density, multiple stories, I think it would be a long-term win-win for not only the city, but for you guys if you would investigate that potential, but apparently it's within your right, and it's an option you chose not to explore. So moving forward, while this isn't, I think, the best plan we would like for the site, it is a plan that meets our ordinances. So with that being said, there were some comments, I think, that were made. I'm trying to remember back to the discussion we had at that meeting about maybe creating some usable space in front of the building. I'm not sure what your proposed tenant mix is, but I'm assuming some food service uses might be proposed, or some coffee, ice cream, things of that nature. I know we talked about creating some outdoor seating, maybe breaking up the wall along Woodward. Was that looked at, discarded, thought about further?
Well, we did and do have an areas for outdoor seating, just not in the front area unless the city has some sort of design idea where you're able to use a sidewalk. But in regards of pushing the building further away from the lot line, no. But it is on the north end of the property, as well as we have quite a bit of concrete area around the building, but that's where the outdoor seating would be proposed.
You just have a 7-foot sidewalk on the rear of the building.
Correct.
Which is just, right, around the building. You could put outdoor seating in the rear because 7 feet is the minimum you need for a sidewalk, and over 2 foot for overhang for a vehicle, correct?
Correct.
So there would not be potential for seating in the rear, as far as I can tell.
Correct.
You know, and we talked about maybe notching out elements of the building to create kind of maybe courtyards, or I think there was a variety of things that we talked about. So really your only potential for outdoor seating, as far as I could see, would potentially be at that corner.
And the city does permit most of the outdoor cafes along Woodward are on city-owned right-of-way sidewalks. So, but that's seasonal seating. They'd have to come in annually and get a seasonal permit and demonstrate they had the width to get around the cafes.
Right. A lot of the existing seasonal are based on existing buildings that didn't have the opportunity. I'm sure they would wish to have a couple more feet of outdoor seating if they could, and we have the opportunity to create that at this time, but that's not something you're interested in doing.
We have the north end. I mean, for a building this size, you know, we looked at, again, the north end of the property is what the outdoor seating is.
How many
what we've
seats
designed.
did you anticipate you could realistically fit into that little corner?
8 to 10.
Okay. All right, I don't have any additional comments. Anyone add or ask any questions of the applicant or staff?
Through the chair. There are bike racks, but they're not shown on the elevation, and that I think if a bike were parked there, it would impede the size of the sidewalk. Is there any opportunity for relocating that?
Yes, that's a good point. Actually, we understand that if we eliminate one of the parking spaces, we can use that towards the parking requirements for a bike rack, and we actually can even add more bike racks, and there's more of an area, and then eliminating one of the parking spaces. That was an item that was discussed before.
Something you're willing to do?
Well, other than if I'm able to relocate the bike racks in a different area that doesn't affect the sidewalks, I'd rather keep them out of parking spaces. So we're able to keep the existing amount of parking spaces, but relocate the bike rack in a different location that does not affect the sidewalks.
Through the chair, Derek or Michelle, review consideration number 1, though, is that 37 parking spaces are needed and 37 are provided. Is there an opportunity to lose a space?
There is with the Planning Commission, unlike the dimensional requirements of the loading zone, the Planning Commission, for pretty much any solid planning reason it sees fit, can waive the ordinance. In the past, we've taken the position that replacing one car space with several bike parking spaces isn't really a reduction in parking, that it's an opportunity for additional parking. So I would say under these circumstances, the Planning Commission does have the ability to eliminate a space and replace it with alternative types of parking.
That would be condition number 11.
Yeah, you would add that be done.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because as proposed, you really wouldn't be able to maneuver on that sidewalk if bikes were parked there.
Yeah, we are looking at this site. Obviously, the on-street spaces, we've become very good at incorporating on-street bike racks. We still want the applicant to accommodate bicycles as part of the site design, but I think it's a safe bet that we've discussed with the DDA that the northernmost on-street space along there is another excellent opportunity to include one of the city's on-street bike racks, which has, I think, an 8 or 10 bike potential. That keeps them off the sidewalk, but also allows bicycle access to the front of the building, which is something we want to encourage, too. We don't want to send people to the back of the building if we can avoid it. So that shouldn't, hesitate on adding them on site as well, but I think we'll put one out front as far as the city goes.
Through the chair, question about the signage. I know it has to follow our ordinance, but is that part of this package, or is the signage totally not?
Signage, we just asked for a note that says all signage will conform with it, because we don't know who the tenants are yet. Usually the tenants submit for the sign permit, so.
But the type of sign and location is part of our review, or?
Not
It's under the code of ordinances.
Yeah,
so
okay.
it'll be
So
separate
it's
permit.
like it's not there on these drawings. Okay, yeah, just.
That's a good point, because on the drawings, I do have a ground sign detail sheet, SPA-1, -7, with a 10-foot height, which is what we're seeking for. As you mentioned, we don't know the exact design or the lettering for even the building.
Yeah, 10-foot ground signs aren't permitted. Prior to staff finalizing any site plan, what we normally do is there's always a note added to the site plan that says all signage will conform with the city sign ordinance and be submitted under separate permit. So there's no signage included. You can put it there as what you intend to do, but the sign as proposed would require a variance and would not be permissible and can't be permitted as part of this approval.
Through the chair, I have a question for Derek. There is a private parking lot behind one of our buildings on a business on Woodward where they have wildflowers in their parking lot. I took photos of it the other day. Unfortunately, my phone crashed and I don't have them anymore. But I think the island that you're talking about is similar to the one on this private property that they maintain in the back. Is that something that you were?
Where is that?
I can't find it on Google Maps because.
Yeah, is that north of the development across the street, north of Lewiston? That's actually a bioswale.
Okay.
So that was developed and built as actual stormwater recharge. That's why all the native plantings are in that.
Beautiful.
Yes, it's fantastic.
I can never call a parking lot beautiful, but okay.
Yeah, and I think that's even less. I think that's about 8 feet wide. As well, if not a little less.
Oh, behind the Pet and Paw?
I don't remember. I was
And the
riding my
Allstate?
bike. Huh?
Behind the Allstate and the Pet and Paw were.
Correct.
Earlier.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Just north of the new development directly across the street. It's northwest corner of Lewiston and Woodward. The old Street Legal Customs and Pac Mail and Allstate.
Right. So it's sort of the similar theme that you're requesting that the Planning Commission consider without it being a bioswale.
Yeah, I mean, either would be appropriate if the soils were correct, and I think the width is there to do either just a simple planting island or potentially a small bioswale.
If I can make a comment, going back to the curbs, I was going to leave it towards the end, but we're not actually proposing parking blocks as well. I don't know if that's a requirement or not. It is? For 18-foot length parking space has a parking curb? Or a parking block?
Yeah, usually, well, actually, our ordinance, in the rarest of instances where you're unable to do a curb, requires blocks. But it typically requires a curbed island as opposed to blocks.
I strongly disagree because, the design standards for parking lots, parking spaces are 18 by 9. As you stated, you can have 16 with a 2-foot overhang, but not knowing why actually a parking curb or even a block is really necessary when many developments don't have that. I'm just wondering why.
Maybe I should clarify. Maybe I've been confusing. The blocks or the curbs are required on the exterior ones where you abut the sidewalk or you abut the wall to keep any kind of over. There's not blocks required in the center, between the center spaces. Maybe I wasn't clear earlier. that make sense?
My understanding.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully, I apologize if I misspoke, but
Yeah, that definitely wasn't clear.
I apologize.
So then it really is a discretionary request to reduce the sizes of the spaces and increase the pervious surface. Number 7 has more to do with that than
Yeah, then the actual,
eliminating
the parking block.
the need for
correct.
parking blocks, because in the center area, it wouldn't be required. It would as it backs up to, well, it's not an open alley.
Not with
so
the
it's not
18-foot
there.
spaces, correct.
So I guess, my question, I want to make sure that I understood the applicant's objection correctly, is that if a landscaped island of some sort is put in between those spaces, you're creating, or at the ends or in between, Derek?
I would do the entire length in between them.
In between,
North
so you're
north
now
of the-
creating basically a barrier that people have to walk over. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and it is a common concern, and many of them that are designed put a small bridge or something in the center.
Let's
So you
really
can-
trudge through them and kill the wild plant.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean,
I understand.
I get that, it's going to turn into like hard-packed dirt, unless there's a way to prevent that. I'm confused about the best way to stick a landscaped island in the middle of, I mean, just tell me what's the
There's
best
not
way
that
to
many.
do it.
There's only 8 spaces.
Right?
So,
To walk around.
right,
what you're saying.
basically. It's not like,
And it's the same
Well-
with Pet and Paw.
2, 3, 4. I don't park in back at Putnam.
I know, but there's a median in the middle and you have to walk around it.
6, 7, 8.
And there's no path.
at most, you're 4 spaces away from.
Yes, and most people, no matter what you do, will walk right over the center of the island,
Unless it's-
unless it's a bioswales type situation where it's
it's-
indented, where it's, where it's sunk out.
Right.
Then they're forced to. But yeah, if it's just a traditional grass island with shrubs, you can put shrubs or arborvitaes in it in certain sections to keep people from walking through. 8 foot wide is enough to plant in, is the only reason we are suggesting it. If it was 3 foot wide, we wouldn't be suggesting it. But the ability to pick up 8 feet allows a reasonable planting bed, allows some arborvitaes, some knockout roses, a mixture of plant materials, including the planting of trees through the center of the parking lot, which are designed to shade impervious surface as well. So it accomplishes, with a straight grass island, you're not going to get much recharge, or there's probably not much difference between impervious and pervious. But it does allow you to pick up the grass area and plant the trees in the center of the parking lot.
Okay. And just to remind, the applicant is just opposed to this idea just because you don't think it's necessary?
Correct. So again, it's a recommendation from the city planner, but our clients, that was an item I've discussed with them. They're not looking forward to putting an island in the center when the parking lot's 37 spaces. I mean, my just argument is that there's already enough islands, a city would control that at least every so many spaces there would be considered an island, at the ends would be considered island, but interior islands between the parking spaces, it's very difficult. So I guess the next development that would have like a Meyer, you're talking about every single row of landscaping. Well, again, it's not a requirement, it's just a recommendation. My clients are not looking to do that at all. And that was one of my 3 objections, so.
Through the chair, it's just a more sustainable way to use the parking lot. It adds an element of sustainability, which is part of where Ferndale, where our master plan was leaning.
Any other? I mean, I think the city would like it, and the applicant has indicated they don't wish to do it. Other?
I have nothing else.
Yeah, thoughts or comments?
No, I mean, I understand, I certainly understand both sides. This seems to me like the things that have changed in terms of the elevations and the design, if we can incorporate, we just had this epic flood in this city, and so anywhere else that water can go other than into a storm sewer, I'm in favor of. I just want to make sure that it's big enough that it's actually doing something other than becoming like concrete, basically. So if 8 feet is big enough that it's
Well, there's probably two options. I mean, one is a landscaped island with trees that does very little, if anything, for impervious surface or groundwater recharge. It may have a minuscule effect, but it does do something from tree canopy standpoint. And we've had the edict from council and the planning commission since I've been here to look for every opportunity to plant trees within the urbanscape. So this is just one of those opportunities. Understood, it's small and probably has very little overall difference, but it's the cumulative effect up and down Woodward through our downtown of continuing to plant trees and see them grow. The other option is some type of bioswale function. Does not have a major impact on stormwater, again, in and of itself, but we've done them with both Taco Bells, we've done them with the private parking lot. As they start to accumulate at every opportunity, you put them in. The city's put them in on our own property and is looking to do more as part of road design. So it has a cumulative effect across the city. So that's a very different design. That you have native plantings and overflow structure. It would probably lessen the amount of underground storage you need to construct because right now they're going to be required to construct enough underground through the engineering review to accommodate all the stormwater. They get reductions in what they're required to put underground if they build a bioswale here, which actually in the trade-off could save, is actually maybe could be cost efficient. I'm not sure, you'd have to talk to your engineers. So there's two ways to do it. One is more of a tree canopy planting. You could not plant those type of trees in a bioswale. You wouldn't get the same canopy effect. They're two different, they both have sustainability aspects to them. One deals more with groundwater recharge, the other one more with trees and canopy and cooling. So either way, I think 8 feet is enough probably to support either, and we'd be glad as staff to work on with the applicant which one they would prefer and which one fits best within the space. We would be comfortable with either. Well done, we think either one of them is an improvement.
Over asphalt, yes.
But if I can make a comment, actually, we're only left with one option. The reason is because the way the site design is when you're reducing the amount of surface area of parking lot, you would need less underground storage. So existing the Taco Bell or the Pizza Hut, we're actually reducing the amount of surface area of the parking lot. So taking the water and going into the 8-foot area, so we're only left with just the idea of just having plants there. So, we may not need the actual additional underground storm because the fact that when you reduce the amount of parking space, surface area, you need actually less area. So,
right, but I'd be, I guess, without doing a review of this, the existing stormwater on site is probably non-existent. So you can't really compare the existing stormwater from Pizza Hut because there wasn't any. And so to meet today's standards, you have to meet today's standards for what you're proposing. So while it may be less impervious surface than what was there for Pizza Hut, your stormwater is still going to be better than. You can't really compare it to the stormwater for Pizza Hut.
I understand. I'll just leave it with the idea that our clients are not looking to develop an 8-foot island between 16 parking spaces that limits, splitting off the two different areas. And that's, again, it's what clients wish and what the city wish. So it comes down to that. And ending with this, that the clients have done a lot. Redesign the building from, if I can stress this out, I know a lot of times cities may not care or whatever, but from what the initial design was for the cost to what we had proposed is a huge change. So more curbs, concrete linear foot per concrete curb is $26 linear foot compared to an asphalt area is a big cost. So, and that's where I can leave it off with. So,
going multiple stories could have helped you get a better return. Okay. With that, any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
I do have a question through the chair. One of the notes says fabric awnings, and then it's shown on, I think, the east elevation. Is that something that it says by tenant? Is that something that you discussed with the appearance review committee, or had any discussion on, or what are you intending with the awnings?
Well, actually,
are they on the Woodward side too? I didn't see them there, but could you just describe?
We ended off, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the awnings would be a requirement or some sort of different pattern design because the solid brick area. But again, everything will have to, whatever material, color, specs by tenant, by landlord, owner, would have to go back to design committee.
Yeah, they are required, but the final design, color, material, exactly as you said, is required to come back for an administrative review of the appearance review committee prior to being approved. So they will be required to place some awnings in those appropriate locations because The Appearance Review and Design Committee felt they had an impact on the breakup of the facade. It's just we agreed that they didn't have to commit to exactly what those would look like right now. So those would have to come back for a second approval.
Okay.
As well as the grout color. That's a joke because they want to be a part of it. So, like I said, we're willing to just, as well as the site. So.
Okay, one more quick question through the chair is replacement trees. So there's a requirement from them. Just in general, what is our policy and where are we throwing all these trees that we can't put on site?
The replacement trees are required when you remove a certain sort. I believe it's a 1-for-1 at a 2-inch caliper. I'm best recollection of the tree ordinance. We prefer to put them on site if we can. We haven't had an instance. The only instance where we've planted them off-site was the developer had an agreement with the adjacent property owner to put them in an easement and place them on their property for additional screening. We haven't had to move them any farther than an adjacent site right now. In previous practice, we have looked at parks and boulevards and other places if there was nowhere to plant them on site, but that hasn't arisen since I've been here.
Through the chair, then, is there a confirmed number of trees being removed?
Yep, number 6 in that condition.
3, is it? Looks like 3.
Yeah, it's 3.
It's 3.
4.
Maybe they're not
1,
of
2,
the
3,
size
4.
that are replaceable.
Right. They may not be always trees. Yeah, I counted 3 originally, but I didn't see this thing in the back, so this must be a little guy. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Oh, we guys in the front.
Yeah, 4 removed.
1, 2.
But I don't know if they all meet the requirements for replacement.
They might
They're
not. I was
healthy
just
or-
wondering where we're putting
One of
them.
them
If we
looks
have
pretty
That's a good
big,
question.
too.
So one of them,
Back one,
I think they all meet the requirement, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, because you did say, they are replacing them on site in combination with the landscaping required by ordinance.
That's what it looks like.
Not in lieu of the required landscaping.
Correct.
Yeah, it looked like they were putting in as many or more than they were taking out.
We will certainly double check and make sure that that's accommodated.
That's all I have.
If I could, through the chair, you mentioned the one requirement on the north elevation. Can you remind me again, or maybe I didn't hear, what was your objection or concern? I guess is number 9.
Yeah, it wasn't just staff. That was discussed at the Appearance Review Committee as well in one of their conditions. They just felt that there was the opportunity to break up that long horizontal element. There's no vertical element through that area. We did talk about windows at the Appearance Review Committee. Why not just continue the windows along that facade? They did make a rather compelling argument based on interior operations. And there does have to be a place where the utilities come in that windows don't work well because it goes right into an equipment room. And that's where most likely all of those are going to come in.
Screened, right?
Yeah, those will be required to be screened in conformance with the ordinance, whether it's through, some type of permanent structure or landscaping or something else, the exterior of them. But we just wanted to make the applicant aware that they are going to need to do something either vertical or with landscaping even to break up that facade prior to getting a final permit. But that was the objection. It's just too much brick facade along such a major road as Camborne is.
And that was one that you had issues with.
Which I agree.
Okay.
I mean, I just didn't know if that meant add more glass because, again, as you mentioned, we're okay with that. Which we can add additional colors. Again, it could be the screening, it could be different materials. We will then go back and get this approved from his office. But in regards to additional glass, yes, he did say that. So
that's all I have.
Any other additional comments, questions? We do have a suggested motion for us this evening. And this is an approval, correct?
Correct.
This is not a recommendation.
No, there's no special land use here. There's no public hearing. This is a straight permitted use.
So this is just to approve the site plan.
Correct.
Right, yeah, and I don't see the suggested
Yeah, we
motion,
have-
but I can read it
There's
from
really
the
an
top.
intro
yeah.
to the motion, it's just the findings and the conditions.
We've got the parcel number. It's okay.
Motion to approve.
It's all right, we've got
The
the
site
parcel number
plan,
at the top.
yeah.
So let me take a stab at this, because we got parcel numbers here.
Add the address
I
and the
move-
Sidwell into the motion,
Yep.
please.
Yep. I would move to approve, I'm sorry.
Well, do it and then
Do you want to, no.
No, go ahead.
Add your,
Yeah, I'll start, go ahead.
She'll make friendly amendments.
Yeah, I will, yeah.
all right. I would move to approve the site plan
Top of the box.
for, I'm sorry?
I was going to say the address isn't up in the top of the box. Okay.
I would move to approve the site plan for 23050 Woodward Avenue, parcel number 25273800022. With the findings and conditions as presented to the Planning Commission. Do you want me to read these?
Can I jump, or do you have to make it and then I can?
Make your,
yeah.
okay, so that is your motion.
Yeah.
Correct. Do we have support?
Second.
Okay.
And no
Now,
discussion.
I have a
Friendly amendment?
friendly amendments to number 7, amend an 8-foot wide landscape island with trees or bioswale be added to the parking lot design. To add number 11, relocate bike rack by waiving 1 parking spot. Number 12, that all signage should conform with city ordinance and be allowed under separate permit. Derek, is that, I mean, however
That's
the
fine.
language.
That's fine.
And that, I'm adding 13 just because I didn't see it, but if someone sees it, let me know. Awnings and materials must be submitted for review by the Appearance Review and Design Committee prior to installation. I think that was everything that I heard.
Do you have a friendly amendment to the original motion maker support to be amended?
Well, I would amend my motion based on the statements made by Deb.
And I will second
Yes, you
my.
support those changes.
Yes, and so now we can discuss all of it.
Okay, so we have a motion, amended motion on the table, supported, made by Commissioner Baker, supported by Commissioner Brazen. Any questions, discussion on the amended motion?
Through the chair, I just would like to make a comment to the applicant. I wanted to express thanks for listening to the Planning Commission on redesigning your the building. It's important to us that we get the right character in Ferndale, and I think the building that you mentioned across the street has a different design look, but I think we heard a lot from our community and residents that was inappropriate, wasn't the right fit for our community. So I really appreciate you going back to the drawing board, literally, and I think you put something very beautiful. I really like it. I do lament that it's not two-story, but I'm just glad that you went back to the drawing board. In addition, the city is doing a tree canopy study for the entire community starting this year. So we have lost a lot of trees in our community, and so this is something, a goal for City Council to look at increasing our tree canopy. So anything that you can do on your site helps us reach those community-wide goals.
Because you're a part of our community now.
Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we'll take a roll call on the motion, please.
Okay. Amelie Piano.
Yes.
Deborah Brazen.
Yes.
Kevin Petrino.
Yes.
Kate Baker.
Yes.
Krista Izar.
Yes.
Sarah Rodiger.
Yes. All right, you are approved. Congrats. Do you guys have a anticipated timeline for when you plan on breaking ground? Still this year or not till next year?
I would have to discuss that with the owners, but obviously we're a little behind, but we're hoping soon as possible, so.
And I'd just like to add, I mean, I know discussion about building facades and some other stuff. I do appreciate the fact that the applicants came back. They took a beating here, and then really at the Appearance Review Committee too, John had to put up with some pretty specific and pretty straightforward thoughts from the Appearance Review Committee, and they did come back to make those changes, so.
Yeah. Again, a while back, the owners were, again, they're a part of Ferndale. I mean, they've owned properties here, and they were excited. So, going back to redesign maybe they didn't want to hear it at first, but they did, and they were gladly to make the change. So
I just wanted to acknowledge they took some very constructive, straightforward, pointed criticism, or John did, on behalf of the owners at the meeting, and I know it wasn't comfortable for him all the time, and I would echo Melanie's thoughts, or Ms. Piana's thoughts, as far as reacting to them and bringing back something that at least the Design Committee, Appearance Review Committee, and for its height, that was acceptable to the community. I know those were not easy meetings for John to sit through, so we do appreciate it.
It's part of the business, right? But
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, next up, we have old business. We have the Meridian Wellness Medical Marijuana Facility site plan approval for 1915 East 9 Mile Road. This is you, Derek, or?
It is. Yeah, and then lucky for these guys, they come back as old business on one night. We have 3 or 4 things on the agenda, so thank you for your patience. As the Planning Commission is aware, or as the Planning Commission is aware, this project did appear previously in front of the Planning Commission for a special land use permit and a site plan consideration. At the time of that meeting, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of the special land use. Subsequently, Council did approve that special land use. The site plan was tabled with some recommendations for changes. Your packet via email was supplemented to include a revised site plan that did include some proposed screening and some additional improvements to address what the concerns of the Planning Commission were. We have reviewed those at this point as staff and recommend approval of the site plan, but obviously they're here to address any questions or address any other potential changes the Planning Commission may want. So with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Hello. Forgot my long johns today.
We do have a few full-size sets, too, if anybody wants to see them. We did get 3 or 4 of them.
I guess to add, since you were here in June for your special land use approval?
Nope, just like Derek said, the couple requests we had was instead of a brick wall, we would like a vinyl fence to kind of maintain a seamless, transition from the neighborhood into the business. We have one homeowner behind us, and their windows look out. We feel like a brick wall. Not only being the only one in the alley, there's no brick retaining walls, but we also feel like they have a privacy fence. A lot of other homes have privacy fences. Maybe that would look a lot better and fit the neighborhood as well. I know I would probably like to look out and see that more than a wall. So that would be.
You're proposing a vinyl fence?
Yes, for the screening wall on the back of the property, the north side of the property.
I missed that totally. Is that on the site plan?
It's on the revised.
I was going to ask about the screening. I didn't see it. That was one of my big concerns.
There's 2 site plans that were submitted, one, and then the packet should have a second one, correct?
Right.
That was added in. That should show a 6-foot-high opaque vinyl fence. It's labeled 21LF, immediately behind the dumpster. Check the packet, make sure it's in there.
It's there. It answers my question.
Yeah, we're showing it in
So
there.
it'd be right on the northeast corner. Coming out, it's about 35-foot stretch.
It's labeled SP2.
Oh, yep, I see it now.
It's a call out above and the right of the fence.
So I guess, I know when you were here after the special use, we didn't talk extensively about your site plan, but we did make some comments, the fence being one of them. What else has changed in your site plan since then?
As for changes, it would just be the dumpster, and the other proposal we would have tonight is the way the city recommended we put the dumpster in that back corner. It's not accessible for a truck to get to it. What we were proposing, we're not going to be creating that much garbage. Perhaps we could put maybe like a shed with a rat wall there for storage, a lawnmower, weed whipper, and we could just have a couple, 30 or 50 gallon cans that we would keep behind the wall of the shed there. We won't actually need a full dumpster for the facility, so maybe that could solve both the dumpster dilemma in where it's placed.
That'd be great.
Thanks. On their condition wall, this dumpster.
The enclosure, but. They've still got the enclosure, right?
So the enclosure's shown on the plan. You're saying you don't want to do it as shown?
Well, that was how the city wanted us to put it in.
Usually dumpsters required for commercial use.
And that's fine. We can put it in. However, the way it was proposed to put in there, a truck cannot get the dumpster out.
The way it's shown on the revised site plan, a truck can't get on it is what you're saying.
Correct. Against the wall there.
Now shown on an angle.
Yep. So do you guys want it angled in the back corner? So kind of cut the corner off. They were parking spaces right there, so it just kind of makes, if the fence is there, we have a vinyl fence, and then a dumpster kind of kitty corner. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we obviously don't want to install a dumpster that's not going to work. We need to design it in a way that works.
Is there a reason that we wouldn't accept their proposal of a less intense garbage use?
I guess I have to look at what the ordinance calls for.
They are different than our,
The ordinance require a dumpster based on the use. Derek, is it just all commercial uses? Is it based on, is it generic, any use that requires?
I don't think it requires a dumpster. It requires if you have one that it be screened with a masonry wall and gates. But I don't believe the ordinance, and I'm talking out of turn here again.
We don't have one at Fern Care.
But I don't believe it requires a dumpster. There's an existing dumpster on the site. The reorientation of the dumpster with the angular entrance does allow the truck to get on it. You can come in off the 9 Mile exit, pull it in, empty it back up, and then leave through the alley. So there is room for a truck to get on the proposed location. Let me see about the trash requirement.
I apologize. I was looking at the previous plans we had. That was the confusion. Sorry about that.
I mean, if the ordinance doesn't require one, then it's kind of a non-issue. If it does require one, my only concern is that,
But the easy way to resolve it is if they want to remove it and it's not required, we can make that adjustment administratively, and anything they do want to construct in that location has to meet ordinance requirements, whether it's a shed or anything else would have to be on a rat wall. And then if it's determined they do need a dumpster, then the revised plan shows it in the appropriate place with the appropriate screening, and we would just require them to construct it as shown. So we can handle that as an administrative item prior to final approval as well. Have a look.
I'm just trying to think of long-term use of the property. Generally, commercial uses require a waste ductile, so I'd hate to design a site that would then not work for potential future other tenants for a commercial use.
As staff, we would prefer to see the dumpster constructed and enclosed appropriately at this time. I know that's difficult, but it does go to, if there's a change in ownership that doesn't require revised site plan approval, we know it's there and that it meets the ordinance requirements.
Right. The ordinance says this waste receptacles shall apply to all uses that have their refuse removal needs serviced by a collective refuse containers in multiple family and non-residential districts. This is a non-residential district.
You are allowed to use, you can use containers and have those picked up by refuse collection too. It's not required to be a metal dumpster enclosed with screening and gates. So they could keep garbage cans in a shed. Technically by ordinance that would be permissible as long as the accessory structure met the requirements, for the site. But
and if it pleases council, maybe we could put something in there when we leave. If we ever sell the building, we could definitely do that, or no?
Yeah, enforcing something like that is very difficult.
Okay.
I guess just thought that I would have so if the applicants say they don't want or need a dumpster, and the ordinance we're saying it doesn't have to have one, the ordinance does say the planning commission may waive the requirement for waste receptacle enclosure, but the business to store all waste indoors. And I think with this type of use, just for potential people who may be interested in what's in your garbage, maybe storing waste indoors might be a good option anyway. Just a thought.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. That'd be fine. I mean, could we?
leave that up to Ben.
Yeah, I mean, if we have like our lunches for a week, can we keep those outside? Yeah. Really, the only thing we're throwing away is paperwork. I mean, you know, we're not going to be throwing anything medicinal away. There's going to be nothing like that in our garbage. You know, it's just going to be shredded paperwork, and that's why kind of having a dumpster is just.
Well, I think you may know that, but I think maybe some interested teenagers in the neighborhood may not know that, and think, hey, let's check it out.
I mean, yeah.
Attractive nuisance, potentially.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess we can leave that as a, just for the condition if we can remove the waste textiles.
Well, in Ferndale, we if it's shredded paperwork, it can also go in sort of our large commercial recycling dumpsters.
Yep, and that's kind of what we were thinking. We'll have a couple of those at the shed, and the shed will have a lock on it as well. So that would maybe deter any criminal activity. But I can assure you, if someone does break into our garbage, that there will be nothing of interest to them other than, you know.
Other site plan related questions for the applicant? One question I have, and just 'cause I haven't been following it very well, I know there's a state bill right now that potentially will change how medical marijuana facilities could operate. How would that impact your operation plan here if that's passed as proposed? Do you know?
We'll kind of have to cross that bridge when we come to it. We don't know what's going to happen yet. Derek, if you would like to touch on
I mean,
that.
that potentially could significantly change
It will,
how this is
yeah,
handled.
there's a couple of things in the ordinance that everybody should be aware of, and I wouldn't mind putting on the record. We discussed it after the last meeting, and council's well aware of it, because some of the discussion that took place there. Their ordinance, or their approval, because of the special land use component, the way that our ordinance deals with it is deals with it through a land use issue. Their special land use permit is conditioned on that business plan, which identifies 3 caregivers and the 5 associated patients per. They do have the ability to come back and ask for an amended special land use that potentially would allow them to operate under the new legislation. But the new legislation does have different rules that also allows the city to reevaluate and puts a lot more, I don't want to say burden, but gives the city a lot more freedom to determine what they do and don't want at the local level. So we made sure in talking with the city attorney that any approval we give now is, 1, is being approved under the current legislation, and 2, that the special land use permit limits them to the operations approved under the current legislation as a land use function. Because the changes in the legislation could have an impact on how many patients, how many caregivers, and those things can impact land use things like the discretionary items in the special land use plan that talk about impact on surrounding neighborhoods, infrastructure, other things. So it's been our attorney's opinion that because the special land use is conditioned on that number of caregivers, that any change in legislation isn't automatically allowed to evolve into existing approved uses, that they would have to come back for revised approvals.
So just to be clear, though, so regardless of if new legislation came about and the city changed this ordinance, they would essentially be grandfathered in based on this special land use approval?
For specifically what's approved.
Right, specifically what we
Right, so we would only be able to serve our 15 patients for the medicinal value, and then obviously going over and above would be, you know, just the retail aspect of it, but only 15 for the medicinal. It would be all we're allowed to do under the special land use right now.
Okay, so even if the state changed their rules and the city decided we wanted to amend our
Correct.
rule to be more...
And what it looks like with the bill right now is they're giving the powers to local municipalities, so everyone will be able to change their rules according to how the city feels and deems it works within your own jurisdiction. So it kind of, you know what I mean? I think they're allowed to even say, you know, null and void it if that's their choice.
I just want to get it on the record to make sure that everyone understood that what we're proposing is for this and it wouldn't change necessarily.
No, you're exactly right. The way our city attorneys reviewed it is, regardless of the change in legislation, even if it allows us to prohibit some aspect of their operation because they have the existing approval, they'd be grandfathered in, but only specifically for the uses approved. Any expansion that would be allowed under the new regulation or on revised local ordinances would have to come back for a revised special land use. They're still limited by the zoning approval regardless of what the legislation does.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no
both of
problem.
you.
It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, is there any other questions or discussion? Otherwise, I know we talked about this at the special land use hearing, so kind of come back to us.
So the vinyl fencing is permitted?
I believe it says a screen wall, correct? And is there some discretion in terms of masonry versus other materials? I know the condition for special land use stated, pull it up now. Yeah, the condition of special land use was that a note be added to include a solid screening wall and to relocate the dumpster near the building. There was also a note be added for lighting to the photometric that it was shielded from residences, which I'm assuming happened. And then the staff verified that neighboring Hazel Park School was in that 500 feet of the site. That was confirmed.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead with the motion. Everybody's okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, can I actually add one more thing? With the parking, we had got confused in the beginning of all this, and we had lowered our parking spots because to the minimum number. Just had a little mix-up. We had thought because of the square footage, it said we had to have 7 spaces, I believe it was the number, and we have an existing, I think, what, 11 or 12 right now? 12 right now, and we wanted to move to have all 12 of those. We might be taking one out for the dumpster or whatnot, but we didn't want to be restructured to the 7, so I just wanted to get that on record.
You lost me on that. So the site plan that you've submitted, what we're approving, shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. And over here.
Yep.
Isn't this theirs?
Behind?
No, the behind is not Mr. Butler's.
No, that's Mr.
However, yeah, we have an existing 12 right now. We had misinterpreted how many spaces we could have, and we thought we could only have 7, which is why we switched it to 7. But there's an existing 12 at the location right now.
You're saying you don't want to add in the trees and the additional landscaping items? You want to go back?
No, we'll do that, but the way they're spaced out is not right. There would actually be about, I believe, 9 or 10 spaces after everything in this. What was the final count? 8 or 9 or?
Okay, well,
It was basically there'll be a couple more spaces than what we have on the site plan. The trees will be there, everything, but it's just the spacing for how many parking spaces are available. We can actually fit more, so I just wanted to make sure we could have the additional spaces.
Okay, sorry. It's okay. So the site plan as shown is what we're approving. So you don't want that approved, what you're saying. You want to change it to what's, not back to what's existing, because what's existing does not show the trees and all the things that are shown on the site plan. But if within that same
space, we can add more
framework,
spaces.
you can work with staff to meet ordinance requirements for minimal dimensions.
Right.
And still fit within the parameters as outlined in here, you'd like additional parking spaces.
Absolutely, yep.
On that point, I'd just like to point out that the barrier-free spaces, they did move them closer to the front of the building, which I think was one of our comments. They do have to meet barrier-free code design guidelines.
Which is 11 and 5, right?
And be signed and so on. So just as long as they fit that within the, the count and the size and the signing and the location closer to the front of the building.
And I guess really going back to the parking, I think a lot of it will go back to whether or not the planning commission, whoever's maker of the motion, requires the dumpster. Because if the dumpster goes away, then you can gain additional parking spaces where the dumpster is.
And that was the thing. I just wanted to make sure if we did have additional spaces, we could utilize them, and we weren't just limited to the 7. If we put those in, we wouldn't have any problem from the city further on. I just wanted to put it on record.
Through the chair, I can't see how you can maintain the handicap accessible space and all the landscaping you've shown and get more on the west side. But yeah, if there's some reconfiguration of the dumpster.
Is sheet SP1 does that indicate your original, like your existing parking? Is that,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They do.
No, that was actually updated, and this is
Like
the
an
original
old
one. We had
SP
already
one?
changed it, because that's when the misunderstanding, and then we caught it the other day, and we didn't have a chance to get it in. Switched about. You guys know how many spaces are on the west side of the lot right now?
How many do you think are there? It's like the same amount.
It's interesting, our challenges are usually about having not enough.
Right.
Am I looking at the wrong building?
Against the wall.
Yeah, I guess that'll be up to the motion maker, whether or not to include that in the motion, that you could work with staff, again, to determine. But we're not willing to sacrifice any of the required landscaping.
Right, yeah, absolutely,
that
absolutely,
we
yep.
talked about.
Limit it to striping.
Okay.
Landscaping, to the striping of the parking versus.
Is everyone clear on that, I guess, or on the same page?
I think I got it.
Can we give approval with approval of the city staff, making sure that everything fits the parking,
Yeah,
given the conditions?
I think as long as in the motion, there's a, one of the conditions states that, the parking may be, modified, provided,
They meet the dimensional requirement.
yeah, they meet, well, obviously, everything has to meet ordinance,
yeah.
that's a given, but, work with staff to see if any potential parking spaces can be accommodated within the existing.
Yeah, the only way they could by ordinance pick up any additional spaces is to drop the dumpster. I mean, other than that, they're at the minimum widths. I mean, the site is substandard as it is, it's existing non-conforming. This is an improvement over that as far as design, but there's not going to be any room to squeeze any additional ones in, I think, without dropping the dumpster or making significant changes. So I think you're going to be pretty close to stuck with what you got.
Okay.
And keep the trees.
Yes.
Will do.
All right, maybe this could be addressed via dumpster discussion, if that's a motion item.
And does that need to be added as a condition?
Because right now, the site plan shows a dumpster, so if the planning commission is going to approve it without the dumpster, I would make that, state that in the motion, that the planning commission, found that dumpster is not necessary, and waste removal can be handled via internal to the building or through an accessory structure, and the dumpster can be replaced with parking to meet ordinance requirements. Something along those lines. I don't know if there's something.
I would move in the matter of 1915 East 9 Mile Road, the Meridian Wellness Facility. The Planning Commission approved the site plan based on plans dated, what am I looking at? Just, were they dated or received? Dated and received? Dated and received by the Planning Department on March 13th, 2014, with the following findings and subject to the following conditions. Findings are enumerated numbers 1 through 4. Conditions as enumerated numbers 1 through 5, with the addition of number 6. Changes to parking striping must be approved by city staff. And number 7, removal of the dumpster is approved, as waste removal can be handled internal to the building.
Internal?
Did that even make sense? I'm sorry. As waste removal can be handled with an
without
accessory
such a large
structure.
capacity.
With an accessory structure.
Okay. So we'll try that again. Removal of the dumpster is approved, as waste can be handled through the use of an approved accessory structure. Does that make sense? Through the addition of an approved accessory structure?
Yeah, or internal.
I'm sorry, I'm writing it down for Barb.
Are you guys following this at all? You good?
I'm writing it down. Through the use of an approved accessory structure or internal to the building. Which means you just put it out on garbage.
Okay. All right, do we have a support for the motion?
Support.
We have a motion and support on the table. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Melanie Piana,
Yes.
Deb Brazen,
Yes.
Kevin Petrino.
Yes.
Kate Baker,
Yes.
Krista Azar,
Yes.
and Sarah Bodek.
Yes. Your site plan is approved. Good luck to you, and then let's work out the details with Michelle and Derek here.
Thank you guys so much for coming out and hearing us.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. This was interesting, right?
Yeah, hopefully you understand, old business always automatically gets put on the back of the agenda. I should have warned you. Yeah, I know.
You guys think about a second story?
All right, next up is call the audience.
Let's have a good night.
Thank you. Administrative items. I know we have an email today about potential meeting dates.
Yeah, we are. We've been remiss. We should have at this point and have not, and that's my fault. We should send out, we're going to send out an email early next week with the available dates.
There was one today.
So,
There was
okay.
one today.
So-
Barb's on time.
So we're not asking you to discuss that tonight, just unless you want to. Just let us know what dates are available, and we'll try to narrow it down to a couple of alternatives that might work for everybody.
What's this?
Oh, sorry. Tuesdays are terrible for me. Throwing that out there.
And is this for an additional meeting? I missed
No.
that. Or is this going back to our normally rescheduled,
Yeah.
back to Wednesdays, or?
It used to be, right, our planning commissions originally were on the third Thursdays of the month, which conflicted with third Thursdays on the 9. So then we talked about changing it, and at that discussion, we said, well, why don't we do it on Wednesday nights? And that lends up to better 4-day weekends and things of that nature. So we moved it to Wednesday. And shortly after we moved it to Wednesday, the courthouse went under construction, and they needed to take our time, so we moved it back to the second Thursday, I believe, right, is where we're at currently?
It was because court was being held.
Right.
Yeah.
So they moved it back to the second Thursday, which is where it is now. And personally, I'm not going to be able to make second Thursdays generally anymore. So I just made a comment that these were never intended to be on the second Thursday anyway. So we originally were always going back to a Wednesday meeting.
I'm okay with that.
So that was the original intent.
Be
But
better for me too.
so I don't know if while we're here, just to
Yeah,
in general,
if everybody
generally-
agrees with the Wednesdays,
And we thought
Wednesdays are
since we're a
great.
smaller commission right now, it'd be easier to get consensus among a smaller group before we have
Add more people, yeah.
Yes.
So do Wednesdays generally work better?
Yes.
I'll figure it out. Way better than Tuesday.
Yeah. And I know one does for me and one doesn't for me. Whoever's UBT is. We're not making.
Second Wednesday,
The
isn't it?
second Wednesday doesn't work for me, so it's the third
Third
Wednesday
Wednesday.
would work for me.
That just happens to work beautifully for me.
Why?
No, I'm just kidding.
Is
I'm
it
here. I can be here
faster?
any night. We're here
No.
at your leisure.
Be effective as of the October meeting then?
If you guys can all agree, then we will change it for the October meeting and do what's necessary to change it.
Look, thanks.
No.
I don't think I have enough electronic devices out right now.
Sorry. Third Wednesday?
That would be the 15th. Oh, I can't.
In general, so let's talk in general, not just next month.
Sure. I mean, in general, yes, but next month I can't.
I think we should go back to, we'll make sure we have quorum,
For what?
our Wednesday meeting.
Right, second or third is what we're talking about.
I will make Wednesdays work, I just can't make October 15th work. I have a previous engagement that I can't change.
Which is understandable.
Yeah, if nobody, if everybody else can meet, then don't worry about me.
I prefer the third week, but that's just so I don't have council, and that's.
Yeah, well, and
So-
I will have ongoing second Wednesday commitments from now on as well.
I'm cool with it if it could start in November, or just know that we'll miss the October meeting.
Well, the second week in October is MAP conference, which I'll be at. I don't know if anyone else will be at. So if it's the second Wednesday of the month too. I won't be at that one.
Why don't we just plan on the third Wednesday of the month, and we'll talk internally about, we'll kind of take a poll to see whether it's better to start in October and not have you, or start it in November and who can't be here, you know what I mean, that kind of thing, because
Yep.
it's going to be.
Sorry, do we have any potential agenda items for October? Maybe it doesn't matter.
Not formally submitted, let's put it this
Okay.
way. The way things are going, though, I would anticipate a pickup in meetings. We don't have anything formally submitted, but we expect the restaurant across the street, site plans to walk in the door tomorrow. They're in a big hurry, so they'll probably be here. Elevations are gorgeous, too.
And we still have a master plan.
Yeah, and we're going to have the master plan
Kicking
meetings,
off at
too.
some point.
Yeah, so, yeah, I would plan on, from this point forward, we're probably going to have most
Okay, so
meetings.
the regularly scheduled meeting right now in October is.
Would be second Thursday right now, but I'm leaning towards third Wednesday.
Because I would.
Yeah, and she'll be at the conference. So right now, I'm leaning towards third Wednesday of the month.
It's fine for me.
It gives me a little more time to get the couple of new members adjusted as well.
That was my next question. Do we have any potential new planning?
We have
commission?
one appointed from the last city council meeting. His name is Joshua Farr. He's a real estate attorney, long-term resident of the city. His family's been around the city for years. I had the opportunity to meet with him, enjoyed our time with him. He's very even-handed, very interesting, I liked him immensely. So hopefully he will fit in very well. We forwarded 2 other potential candidates to the mayor for consideration with the request that they were very similar in their applications, both of them. And we met both of them, Wayne State graduate planning students, shorter term residents, but very engaged, very excited to be part of the community. So we've sent those to the mayor to have him talk to, and recommended that he appointed just at least one.
How many vacancies do we have?
We have 3 total.
Okay.
So those would be 2, and then we are actively looking, if anybody knows, we believe there would be a good opportunity for either an architect or a landscape architect. A landscape architect could really be helpful because we don't have a lot of access to one as staff either. To deal with tree species, bioswales, someone who's versed in those type of implementations to evaluate species. We do our best job of it, but if there is someone who's a qualified landscape architect, registered landscape architect in the community.
Does it have to be that specific?
No,
Could it be an arborist?
potentially. I like the idea of a registered landscape architect because the plans we get are often submitted by registered LAs, so someone who has those credentials is very helpful, but it certainly doesn't have to be. If someone has long-term experience and understands species and type and design, we think that could be helpful to us as well.
Will any of those candidates be ready for the October meeting?
Joshua's already been appointed, and we hope to have one of the other 2 appointed by that point as well, leaving us potentially with only 1 vacancy by the October meeting.
Even if I can't make it, you can still make quorum?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
That's we better.
Okay. All right, so do we need to make a motion or do anything to officially change our meeting dates to the 3rd Wednesday?
Do we?
I
Barb says
move
make a
to
motion.
change the planning commission meetings to the 3rd Wednesday of each month,
Second.
Any discussion?
starting at 7 o'clock.
The only discussion I have is just make sure we update, like I know like the
Yep.
development guide you just did and the 360, it all talked about the meeting dates for planning commission, which are now changing.
Good point.
Website, I don't know what all those, probably a lot
Not a
that
piece-
goes involved to changing the planning commission meeting, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, reserving rooms.
No, we prefer the Wednesday as well. It works better for us as staff anyway, so we're fine. It certainly it makes
They
it
want
our
a roll
job
call
easier.
on this? Or?
And I,
Oh, yeah, sorry, this was just discussion, sorry.
sorry.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you in advance to whoever approves my missing the October 15th meeting.
All right, administrative items, you want to do an update on the master plan?
Sure.
Or where are we going now that we have some rankings, or what's the next steps?
So we had 10 people review the master plan update proposals, and I believe we had 8 people submit. And so these are the evaluations based on those who have submitted their evaluations. So as you can see here, the top 3 were McKenna, Carla, Wortman, Archive DS, Wade Trim. Those 3 proposals were the top 3 candidates. But Hamilton, Anderson, and LSL Planning were a close 4th and 5th place, so.
Yeah, we never did decide. I mean, the evaluations and the scores did not clearly delineate a top 3 and then separate the rest of them from them. And there was no real outliers. Everybody was pretty consistent in their evaluation other than the one. The question we have for the Planning Commission is we basically have 2 options we think that are worth considering. One is to interview the top 5. Instead of, normally we would only recommend the top 3. But the top 5 in this instance, the scores are close enough. And you could make an argument that the top 7 are close enough, but we feel that's unwieldy to interview that many. So the options are to interview the top 5, and/or we consider the possibility of interviewing the top 3, and if not satisfied after those interviews, bringing in the next 2 to interview as well. So you can start with 3 and make a determination if one kind of blows your doors off and you want to go with them, and stick with the top 3, and only interview the next 1 or 2 if you don't hear or see what you want, or we could schedule the top 5. And we do need a suggestion. The interview committee will not consist of 10 people. It can't. We need a recommendation from this board as to who will sit on the interview committee as well from the Planning Commission.
Who was invited to review the proposals
The Planning Commission, myself, the Parks and Rec Director, the DDA Director. So there was 10 of us total.
Parks and Rec Director and DDA Director?
Correct.
And then staff.
And then us too.
And then all of you guys as well.
If I could make an addition to his comments, just for discussion, with the 3 versus 5, some of the components, if you look at the Hamilton and Anderson and LSL planning, they actually scored higher on being complete and responsive to the scope of the RFP versus the top 3. So just added for discussion. It might take that into consideration.
Yeah, my only thought is that by saying you're going to interview 3 and then you're going to interview the 2 later, you probably never get to those. You know what I'm saying?
You would only go to those 2 if the 3, after you interviewed the 3, the group of interview panelists said, we didn't like any of those. We're not blown away by any of those. Schedule the other 2. That would be the only reason to.
I think that would be an unnecessary delay if that occurred.
Okay.
And the chances of that happening, I think, would be pretty slim. Maybe my thought.
I concur.
And I'm always surprised at interviews, because a lot of times I go to interviews thinking I know exactly who I want, and then the interviews totally change my mind.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean,
You want to interview the top 5 then?
yeah, I mean, I think that is a bit much, but
It's not. It's a day one way or the other, most likely.
yeah.
And they were good.
The thing is, any of them could do it.
Right.
Yeah,
Those
we wouldn't
5,
get a-
I would-
Well, not some of them.
You can tell they just stapled some advertising material together and said,
I just don't want them to come in,
I want to
though.
see how they're going to do it.
I
I
would
kind of
love
want to give it to them to see, all right.
you want to interview them? I mean, we can do 6. You want to?
I want to fake give them the project and see how they can.
Well, we
They're
can
going to give
interview them
everybody
for
free
fun.
chachi pants. Did anybody read it?
And I
Dress up in
apologize.
clown costumes for the interview and interview them.
I apologize. I noticed afterwards, I'm like, why do they have 1 for all of these? And I realized that I didn't
couldn't
allow a
give a
0
zero.
option. I'm sorry about that. I guess I didn't anticipate any zeros. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, I guess if you're interviewing 3, what's the harm in interviewing 5?
Okay, I see a lot of nodding to and just interviewing the top 5, and
So,
How long is
we're
an
not opposed
interview?
to it.
How long, would we 1 hour each?
should we make them a half hour?
Usually like 45.
Well, we'll schedule them an hour apart, but tell them a half an hour for their presentation at the most. Or do you want me to limit their presentation to 15 or 20 minutes and schedule them?
Half hour, 15-minute question and answer, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's
In between.
I think it's
turnover.
Okay.
I think our scope, quite frankly, was very all over the place with the Parks and Rec and the master plan and maybe hybrid zoning and maybe this and maybe this. I think you're going to need the
I
time
think
to
so, too.
discuss it
I
out.
agree. I don't disagree at all. Okay, 5 hours. Who wants to participate? We'll leave it up to you guys as to how many. We're trying to keep it to a manageable number.
Do you know, in terms of the staff, or Parks and Rec Director, I'm sure has to be involved because it's Parks and Rec plan.
Yes.
So I'm assuming, is DDA Director also going to be involved?
We haven't decided yet. I would assume so.
So it's already going to be 4 people.
Yeah,
essentially.
3. There can be 1 from our department.
Michelle's
Rec
kind of run
Director.
this. I think she should be involved.
Well, she certainly will be involved, but as
Well, I
far as,
mean-
if City Council wants 2, and the Planning Commission wants 2, and the Parks and Rec Board wants 1, and Sustainability wants 1, and,
I would represent sustainability.
I don't think sustainability.
You know,
well, there's a sustainability plan, and they're very interested in that and want to know who's going to be conducting that as well. So everybody, we did couch a lot into this and try to get it done. There's an economy of scale to it, but there's a lot here. So we'd like to keep the interview panel to 5, 7 on the outside gets a little unwieldy.
When you already had, it sounds like that pretty much handled without maybe 1 or 2 representatives from planning?
We would request 1 from planning, 1 from council, 1 from Parks and Rec, so.
and I would be the one from council, so.
I mean, it'd be interesting, but my schedule's funky, so it depends on the day if I can actually get that day off to get
Yeah.
here to do it.
Yeah, because with this, I don't think we're going to do interviews on a Saturday, and it's going to have to be daytime.
Right, yeah.
So it would be first thing in the morning. If we do 5, we'll probably break for lunch, and then.
All day.
I would at least plan on an hour afterward to discuss as a group and decide whether we've got a clear-cut selection or whether we need to bring 1 or 2 back in for short interviews. So it's going to be pretty close to a whole day.
It is. It's not a season
Yeah.
in the.
And how
nonprofit
soon
world,
is
but
this
I
within
think day off
2-3 weeks, or?
On the outside. I'd like to have it scheduled within 2 weeks.
If I can, I mean, I'm not,
No.
I will do it.
Well, yeah, I would say even who's even available? I guess is the question.
As long as if you don't tell me like, hey, 2 days from now,
No,
what
no.
we're doing. If I have like at least a week's notice where I can block the day off and move appointments around.
Can you give, if you want to volunteer, can you give us a couple of 3 days you know you can take the day off?
As long,
2 weeks in advance?
Yeah, like 2 weeks out, everything's still pretty
Perfect.
blank. So
We'll make sure
you know,
it is,
with
yeah.
with few exceptions.
We want to give them at least 7 days' notice, preferably
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
Don't bring it in. The
don't
worst
need
thing
it.
we can do here is rush.
Mhm.
I mean, I understand we're all very excited, including us, to get to it, but I think taking our time and doing it right and making sure we have the right consultant up front is probably the most important.
And if Deb's on it, then she can cover sustainability. And if
I'd possibly be interested too, depending on your schedule.
Okay.
Because I think at this point, if we're so limited in terms of number of people who can be at the interview, I think the master plan is such an important thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the more representatives from planning commission, the better.
I agree.
So if we could have 2 from planning commission or 3
Okay.
that are somehow represented from other boards as well, that'd be
Okay.
preferred.
I anticipate, Mel, that you, either through sustainability or council, I'm sure council is going to rely on you to participate in the interviews. So that gives you at least 3 planning commission members at that point, so.
Well, I'll just caution that I just accepted a full-time job offer, and so I need to weigh my days off.
Okay,
So
understood.
Congrats.
Okay.
I'm full-time now at DDP.
Yeah, she just used all her vacation days to
Okay.
go to Nepal.
We'll figure it out. We'll work with Kevin. We'll work with Kevin.
Yeah, I would like to theoretically be involved, but there's no way. Not happening.
Unless we come out there and.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can talk to Ed.
I was
If
going to
you
say,
can clear Ed.
tell Ed I need to have you for the day.
If you can ask permission from my boss.
No, no. I'm not getting into that.
However it works, but I'd be willing.
I gotcha.
to-
We
yeah.
appreciate it. We'll make sure it works for, the people who volunteer, we're going to make sure it works for your schedules first. That's part of the reason we like to keep it as small as possible too, is because doing it during the day and 5, most everybody has a full-time job.
None of
so.
them can, then maybe I can. I mean.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go down the chain.
Pretty
If
much
you
very
can't
serious
get it,
interested in
yeah.
it.
Okay.
I
And certainly
think
anybody
after
who isn't
September 1st
participating,
is
if you're
like
available, is able to come watch. As a
Just
planning
fine.
commission, you can come. We just want to limit the number of people who actually sit in there asking.
I'd just be curious to hear the results of it.
Yeah, okay.
Would
Maybe we'll tape them.
with
Should.
New planning commissioner, would it be a good project to get them started?
No. Not in the interview, no.
when there's
Fresh
work
perspective.
assignments,
No.
yeah.
Committees,
Committees, volunteer.
Okay.
Voluntold,
All right, is there anything else on the master plan? So we have the next 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully, probably than the 3 weeks, but.
Probably.
All right, so then the goal will be to award and get this started by like November, hopefully?
Hopefully, yeah, because once they're identified, we work out a final scope of services, because we were with the RFP, we were asking for a lot, we were adding things at the last minute. We need to adjust the scope of service to make sure each issue is getting it. Then we need to take the contract to council. We've budgeted a certain amount of money over the next 2 years, but with everything that's being asked for and everything that was put in the RFP, it's probably going to exceed what we budgeted. So we're going to have to go to them and talk to them about, are they willing to support the additional endeavors? We believe they are, but we're going to have to double check, and then we'll get rolling with the actual process.
Any other questions on the master plan? I have a question just about the follow-up from our last meeting we had, the whole density discussion that we had over the library. So do we have any follow-up? I know we were going to talk to the attorney, and maybe
We've
we'll
had a
talk
couple of
about
conversations, and
having maybe future discussions with maybe council members.
I'm waiting for him. He's looking into the appropriate vehicle, and then I would suggest that the next step is he's going to put something to paper. We said once we did that, you guys would discuss the geography, that you felt it was appropriate that any type of limitation or requirement applied to. So in discussions with him, it's kind of the cart before the horse. He's indicating he's concerned about knowing the geography before picking the tool. But he's coming up with a few options to sit down and talk with the Planning Commission about. We hope to be back with some type of options at the October meeting. But literally with everything else that's going on, garnering his time is a little bit difficult as well, so.
Okay. And I have a question too. Can you give an update about the housing project near Royal Oak Township?
Before we switch
Oh,
gears, I
sorry.
just want to talk about this, sorry. I guess, is there anything we can do? I know the discussion at that meeting was that, we want to kind of do somewhat of a stopgap measure to prevent future Pizza Hut redevelopment. So I think time is somewhat of the essence. Do we have
I
any
agree.
leverage to give a deadline to the city attorney or state that we want it on October 15th meeting?
I think it would be helpful if we had something to review at the festival.
Yeah, I think, I don't want this to drag for another 3 months.
Okay.
Me neither.
So if we could,
Okay. I will pass
whatever
that along.
leverage we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it on that topic.
Can you give an update about the housing project around,
Well, we're doing the environmental on the site. We've done a phase 1. There was no surprises in the phase 1, but we do have to go on and do a phase 2. And that geotech and that work is being done right now. So we haven't seen anything that would prevent a project, but I certainly believe, based on the historic use of the site, to do a housing project, there's going to be some remediation necessary as well. So to the extent and how much, that's what we're determining right now. We've kept Oakland Housing in the loop so far. They don't appear to be concerned with the information we've discovered. And as soon as we have some more information, we're going to sit down with them next week and talk with them about the amount of remediation, how that would be handled, whether that would be handled through TIF from a brownfield on the site, and how much assessed value would be created on the site to allow for that remediation to be paid for by the development as opposed to an independent source, either the city or someplace else. So we're still doing the environmental. We're going very slow and making sure that we're doing it right. So that's where we're at right now.
Also, like I added that I am going to the MAP conference as well, so I don't know. I'm sure a few of you might be attending, but if there's anything that you wanted me to attend or whatnot, I guess report back, and I'd be happy to.
Are we on commission items?
Or split a room, yeah.
Sorry, I'm taking my son and my husband.
Yeah, I'm not going up this year.
Mackinac Island. And they're like,
Take a horse.
I'm like, oh, pay for me to
Yeah,
go.
we went last time. We
Alright,
just
is
went to Mita.
Is there anything else for administrative items for you guys?
Nothing I can think of.
Before we get to open items, we have under commission items, we have the Detroit Master Plan proposed amendments. I know it's, it's a requirement through the state act that they notify all neighboring communities. If you guys had a chance to review it, it's really nowhere near us at all. But it's usually a professional courtesy just to do I send a typical response letter saying, I don't know if we
The
can.
planning commission's reviewed it.
Yeah, just, it
Yeah,
looks
it has
fine.
no concerns.
We commend you for your planning
Exactly.
efforts, blah, blah.
Yep, we've sent them before.
Okay, so are we good with that? Yep. Do we need to make a motion to direct you to do that? Or yours?
We'll just do that.
Okay. All right, other commission items. Baker.
I have a question, so I guess it goes under commission items. I've been getting this question from a couple of local residents, and we just talked about it in the site plan that we did for the second Camborne development. At the first Camborne development, I just kicked something. Sorry.
Dog.
The Lennox fan.
Yeah, we would have heard that.
Yeah, Mike's
In the first Camborne development, did we require any meter screening on Camborne? Because it looks like super crap.
Require any what?
Meter screening?
Utility screening.
It's right at Camborne on the south,
Yes.
the south facing
Yes,
wall.
and they still need to plant it.
Okay,
They're not done.
okay. Thank you.
Sure, I need to double check, but
I will
because
tell.
we wait for the screening plans to see, they don't know until they have the tenants where that stuff's actually going to poke into the building. But yes, I believe we did, and I believe it still needs to be installed, but I will double check.
I will tell the two concerned parties that it is
I think
going to happen. Thank you.
I can only guess.
No, I don't think it's bad. No,
Okay.
thought it looked awful and was detrimental to their neighborhood.
Okay.
No, and it's not the across the street.
Okay.
No, a business owner who
Yeah,
is
yeah.
lovely.
No, yeah, it looks terrible. I mean, yeah,
Yes.
every building has one someplace, but yeah, that one looks awful.
Great.
I like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We just talked about it, so.
Yep.
Sure. I bet you know.
Any other commission items? All right. With that, we adjourn. Do we need a motion to adjourn? I forget. Motion, someone make a motion to adjourn?
You guys always have. I don't think you need to. I think you can just adjourn the meeting. I don't think it's necessary.
No, we're done.
You guys have always done it. Everybody does it differently. It's not required by, Robert rules to have a motion to adjourn.
Yeah. I'm like, cool. I'll make a motion.
Talk in my ear.